Amelia's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the folder. The papers inside her husband's locked desk drawer told a story she had never been meant to find. Offshore accounts, forged signatures, and her name. Her name on documents she had never signed. Her name on deals she had never agreed to. Her name used as a shield for crimes she knew nothing about. She had been married to Victor Carter for 7 years. And she had just discovered she was never his wife. She was his insurance policy. If you are watching this story right now, please subscribe to our channel and follow this journey all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The rain started around 9 o'clock that evening. Amelia remembered that detail later with strange precision. Not because the rain was unusual for early November, but because she had been standing at the kitchen window watching it fall, when she heard Victor's home office door swing open harder than it needed to. That was always how she knew his mood before she saw his face. The force he used on doors told her everything. She had been making tea, chamomile, because she had a headache that had been sitting behind her left eye since morning, the kind of headache that comes not from illness, but from the particular exhaustion of a woman who has spent too many years trying to read a man who never wanted to be understood. She heard his footsteps cross the hallway. She heard them stop. She turned around. Victor was standing in the kitchen doorway holding the folder. Her stomach dropped so fast she gripped the counter edge with both hands. She had found those documents 3 hours earlier, when she was looking for their joint insurance files, the ones the accountant had asked for twice in the past month, and that Victor kept promising to send over, but never did. She had gone into his office while he was at his club dinner, opened the bottom drawer of his desk the way she had done 100 times before, and found a second compartment she had never noticed, hidden behind a false panel that she only discovered because a pen had rolled behind the drawer and she reached back to retrieve it. The folder had been sitting there in the dark for God only knew how long. She should have put it back. She should have pretended she never saw it. But she had opened it. And once she started reading, she could not stop. Victor's voice came out very quiet. That was always the warning sign. People who did not know him thought his silence meant calm. Amelia had learned years ago that Victor's silence was the moment before a storm that had already decided where it was going to land. "Where did you find this?" he said. Not a question, a statement with a knife inside it. "The bottom drawer," she said. "I was looking for the insurance documents. The accountant needed them, and you said you would send them weeks ago." "You went through my private files." "Victor, I wasn't trying to go through anything. I found a folder with my name on it. My actual signature on documents I have never seen before." "What is this? What did you do?" He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and set the folder on the counter between them with a deliberateness that made her flinch even though he had not touched her. Yet. "You're looking at something you don't understand," he said. "Business is complicated. You've never had any interest in understanding how I operate. I understand what a forged signature looks like," she said, and she was proud of how steady her voice came out, even though her whole body was trembling. "I understand what offshore accounts are, and I understand that my name is on contracts I never signed connected to companies I have never heard of. Victor, these look like shell companies. These look like—" "Stop." His voice dropped even lower. "Stop right now before you say something you cannot take back. Tell me what this is. I told you, it's business. My name is on these documents. Your name protects certain assets. It's a legal arrangement, nothing unusual. Without my knowledge, without my consent." He looked at her then with an expression she had never quite seen on his face before. She had seen him annoyed. She had seen him contemptuous. She had seen him bored by her in the way powerful men get bored by things they believe they already fully own. But this expression was different. It was calculating. It was the expression of a man looking at a problem and deciding what to do with it. "You're my wife," he said finally. "What affects me affects you. What protects me protects you. That's how this works." "I didn't agree to that." "You agreed to it when you married me." She stared at him. "Victor, those companies. I looked at some of the names in that folder. There are transactions here that go through countries we've never visited. There are payments from organizations that don't have public records. If someone came asking questions about these accounts, my name is on everything. I could be held responsible for things I knew nothing about." He was quiet for a moment, and in that quiet she understood something she had been refusing to understand for a very long time. He was not going to apologize. He was not going to explain. He was assessing. He was deciding whether she was still useful to him or whether she had just become a liability. "You're tired," he said. "You've got a headache. You found something you don't understand, and you're panicking. Go upstairs and get some rest. We'll talk about this tomorrow when you're calmer." "I am calm," she said. "I am terrifyingly calm. And I am not going upstairs until you explain to me what I found in that folder." Something shifted in his face. "Get your coat?" he said. "What?" "Get your coat. Amelia, I'll drive you somewhere we can talk properly. Not here. I don't want to have this conversation in the house." She should have refused. She knew that later, lying on cold pavement with rain soaking through her clothes, she would know with absolute certainty that she should have refused. She should have taken out her phone and called someone, her sister, her friend, Rachel, anyone. She should have stayed inside where there were walls and light and the illusion of safety. But she had spent 7 years trusting this man, 7 years believing that whatever problems existed between them were temporary, that his anger came from pressure, that his distance was a symptom of a difficult life and not a reflection of how little he valued her. She had spent 7 years finding explanations for his behavior that made her feel like a generous and understanding wife, rather than a woman who was afraid to see the truth about the man she had chosen. She got her coat. They drove for 40 minutes. She tried to talk twice during the drive, and both times he told her to wait. They were almost there. He would explain everything. His voice had gone completely even, completely controlled, the way it always went when he had already made a decision that he knew she would not like. She did not recognize the road they turned onto. She did not recognize the empty lots and the dark warehouses, or the way the streetlights got farther apart and then disappeared entirely. She had lived in this city for 11 years, and she did not know this part of it existed. "Where are we?" she asked. He stopped the car. He did not answer. "Victor, where are we?" He turned to look at her, and she saw it clearly now. Whatever performance of husband he had been giving her for 7 years, he was no longer performing it. His face in the dark of the car was the face of a stranger. "Those documents you found," he said. "If they become public, they cause problems. Not just for me. For people I work with. People who do not respond well to problems." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Victor? You finding that folder is a complication. Victor, I am your wife. You are a liability," he said. And he said it the way a man says something he has thought through very carefully and arrived at with complete certainty, not with cruelty, almost with detachment, which was somehow worse than cruelty would have been. "You know too much. And you're the kind of woman who does something with information like that because you think you have principles. I've always admired that about you, actually. It's also why we're here." She grabbed the door handle. It didn't move. Child locks. She spun to look at him. "Victor, I need you to listen to me very carefully," he said, "because how you respond to what I say next is going to determine how the rest of your evening goes. You are going to get out of this car. You are going to go home. You are going to pretend you never opened that folder. You are going to sign the additional documents my attorney will send you next week without reading them. And if you do those things, this stays manageable. If you don't..." "If I don't, what?" Her voice was shaking now. She was not trying to hide it anymore. "Then I tell the people I work with that you found the documents and that you're unstable, and that you've been making threatening statements. And those people deal with unstable problems in ways that I don't control and don't want to think about." She felt as though someone had taken the world she knew and folded it in half so that none of the edges lined up anymore. "You would do that," she said. "You would actually. I'm trying to give you a way out of this that keeps you safe," he said. "That's me being generous. That's me remembering that at one point I did care about you. Take the door release on your side. I unlocked it. Get out of the car and walk back toward the main road. There's a gas station about a mile north. Get yourself a cab home. Think about what I said. And when I get back, I expect this to be over." She did not move. "Amelia, you were going to let me take the blame," she said. It was not a question. She was saying it out loud because she needed to hear herself say it. "If something went wrong with those companies, if investigators came, you were going to give them my name and step back. That was the plan. That's been the plan." He did not answer, and his silence was its own answer. "Get out of the car," he said. She got out. She stood in the rain on the empty road and watched his taillights disappear around the corner, and then she walked forward 3 steps before her legs stopped working properly. She did not fall dramatically. She just went down slowly, her knees hitting the pavement first, and then her hands, and she stayed there in the rain because she did not know yet where she was supposed to go or who she was supposed to be anymore. 7 years. 7 years she had spent being careful of his moods and quiet about her own needs and grateful for whatever version of love he was willing to offer her. 7 years she had spent apologizing for things that were not her fault and explaining herself to a man who had already decided she was not worth listening to. 7 years she had spent wondering what she was doing wrong that made him look through her instead of at her. What she could change, what she could improve. What version of herself might finally be enough to make him choose her the way she had chosen him. And all this time he had been using her, not loving her, not even resenting her. Just using her the way you use a tool, and the moment the tool created complications, you drove it to an empty road and left it in the rain. She was still kneeling on the pavement when she heard a car. Not the sound of her husband coming back. Different engine. Heavier. Slower. Headlights swept across her and stopped. She heard a car door open. She heard footsteps. "Hey!" A man's voice, low and calm. "Hey, look at me." She looked up. A man was crouching in front of her. Dark coat rain already darkening his shoulders. He was looking at her with an expression that was not pity exactly, and was not calculation. It was the expression of a person who has seen a situation clearly and decided what to do about it without needing more information. "Are you hurt?" he said. "I don't know," she said, which was the most honest answer she had ever given anyone. "Can you tell me your name?" "Amelia." "Amelia. My name is Lucian." He said it the way a person says something important, not to impress her, not to threaten her, just to let her know who she was dealing with. "I'm going to help you stand up. Is that all right?" She noticed then that there were 2 other men standing farther back near the car, watching the road in both directions. She noticed that the car was large and black and expensive. She noticed that the man in front of her had the kind of stillness that does not come from peace, but from absolute control of oneself. She also noticed that she was in an empty part of the city alone in the rain, and that whoever this man was, he was the only thing standing between her and the fact that she had nowhere to go. "Yes," she said. "That's all right." He took her hands in both of his and helped her stand. His hands were warm. She did not expect that. "There's a car behind me," he said. "You're going to get in it, and my people are going to take care of you. Do you understand?" She looked at him. She thought about how strange it was that the night she discovered her husband had never loved her was the same night she found herself trusting a man she had never met before, based on nothing more than the warmth of his hands and the directness of his voice. "I don't know who you are," she said. "No," he agreed. "You don't. But you know who left you here, and you know which one of us came back for you." She had no answer for that. He was right. One of them had driven away. One of them had stopped. She let him walk her to the car. One of the other men opened the back door. She got in. The seats were warm. The rain stopped being something she was standing in and became something happening outside glass that she was watching from a safe distance. Lucian got in beside her. He did not touch her. He did not speak immediately. He let her breathe for a moment. Then he said quietly, "Do you need a hospital?" She checked herself. Her knees hurt. Her palms were scraped from the pavement. Her whole body felt like something that had been wrung out and set down too hard. But nothing was broken. Nothing was bleeding badly. "No," she said. "I don't think so." "All right." He leaned forward and said something brief to the driver that she didn't quite catch. Then he sat back. "You're in my territory," he said. Not unkindly, just factually. "This entire area. Nobody comes here without me knowing. When my people saw a car stop and a woman left on the road, they called me. You came yourself," she said. "I don't send other people to handle something I haven't seen," he said. She looked at him, then really looked at him for the first time. He was not what people probably imagined when they heard the name Lucian Moretti, though she did not know yet that was a name she was supposed to know. He was not wild-eyed or volatile or decorated with visible evidence of his power. He was simply a man who had learned to take up exactly the amount of space he needed and no more, and who looked at you as if nothing about you was beneath his attention. "What happens now?" she said. "Now you come somewhere safe," he said. "And when you're ready, you tell me what happened, or you don't if you're not ready. Either way, you're not staying on that road." She nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My husband left me there." Something changed in Lucian's face. It was subtle. The kind of change that only happens in someone who has very strong feelings and very strong control over them, fighting each other in the same moment. "I know," he said. "His name is Victor Carter." She felt more than saw the way that landed. Lucian's voice stayed completely even. "I know who he is," he said. "He used my name," she said. "On documents, for things I knew nothing about. And when I found out, he said I was a liability." She said the word the way he had said it. Flat, like a category rather than a person. "He said I was a liability, and then he drove me out here and left me on the road." Lucian was quiet for a very long moment. When he spoke, his voice was so controlled that she could hear the effort in it. "No one leaves a woman to die in my city," he said, and walks away from that. She understood then, somewhere beneath the shock and the grief and the particular exhaustion of a woman who has just had her entire life dismantled in the span of a few hours, that she had not ended up in this car by accident. She did not know yet what that meant for her. She did not know yet who Lucian Moretti really was, or what kind of world she had just been brought into, or how far Victor's panic would push him when he discovered she had survived the night and found her way to the one man in the city whose protection even his criminal partners would not dare to challenge. She did not know any of that yet, but she knew that the car was warm, and that the man beside her had come back for her when no one else had, and that sometimes that has to be enough to keep breathing for one more hour. She leaned her head back against the seat. Outside, the rain kept falling on empty roads and dark warehouses, and the place where Victor Carter had left his wife behind and believed she would simply disappear. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about most things, it turned out. But that was a lesson he had not yet learned. The mansion was everything her marriage had not been. She understood that in a strange, sideways way when the car finally stopped and she was helped inside, not grabbed, not dragged, helped by a woman named Daria, who introduced herself calmly and asked whether Amelia wanted tea or hot water for the cuts on her palms before anything else. Amelia said tea. Daria brought both. The room she was put in had high ceilings and heavy curtains and a bed that felt like someone had considered the concept of rest very seriously before designing it. There was a bathroom with towels that were warm when she reached for them. There was dry clothing folded on a chair, not glamorous, not borrowed from someone's closet. A plain white shirt and soft pants that fit reasonably well, which told her that someone had looked at her before she had the chance to ask for anything. She sat on the edge of the bed and held the cup of tea in both hands and tried to organize what had happened in the past several hours into something her mind could process in pieces rather than all at once. Her husband had used her name on criminal documents. Her husband had driven her to an empty part of the city. Her husband had told her she was a liability. Her husband had driven away. She kept coming back to the word, liability. After 7 years of building a life with a person, of making room for his moods and his silences and his needs and his version of events in every argument they had ever had, of wearing down her own instincts every time they told her something was wrong. And he told her she was imagining things. After all of that, she was a liability. Not a wife, not a person, a liability, something to be managed and then discarded. Daria came back some time later to check on her and found her still sitting on the edge of the bed, the tea half drunk and cold in her hands. "You should sleep," Daria said. Not unkindly, just directly, the way people in this house seemed to communicate, as if getting directly to the point was a form of respect rather than rudeness. "I don't think I can," Amelia said. "Then you don't have to," Daria said. "But you should try to eat something. You have been in shock. Your body needs something to work with." Amelia looked at her. "Who are you to him?" she asked. "I've worked for Mr. Moretti for 9 years, Daria said. "I run the house. I make sure the people inside it have what they need." She paused. "He doesn't bring people here, especially not like this." "Like what?" "Like someone who needed to be kept safe," Daria said. And there was something in the way she said it, careful and deliberate, the way someone says a thing they want heard correctly, that made Amelia go very still. "He doesn't make a habit of this," Amelia said slowly. "He makes a habit of his own rules," Daria said. "And one of those rules is that certain things are not permitted within the area he controls. Certain kinds of harm. He is not a gentleman in many respects. But there are lines he does not cross and does not allow to be crossed." She looked at Amelia directly. "What was done to you tonight crosses one of those lines." Amelia set down the cold tea. "He's going to do something about Victor," she said. "That is not something I can speak to," Daria said. "But I can tell you that you are safe here. That is not a comfortable word for most people who come here, I know. But it is true." She left Amelia a plate of food, bread, cheese, something warm in a bowl that Amelia ate without tasting, because her body knew it needed fuel, even if her mind was somewhere else entirely, and then left her alone. Amelia sat in the silence of that room for a long time. She thought about the folder she had found. She thought about the documents with her signature that she had never signed. She thought about the way Victor had looked at her in the car before he unlocked the door and told her to get out. The total absence of regret in his face. The sense that he had already moved past her before the car door closed. As if she was a problem he had worked through in his head, and the solution was clean enough that it didn't require him to feel anything. She thought about 7 years. She thought about the early ones when she had believed in him so completely that his certainty about everything had felt like strength instead of a warning. When his confidence had looked like safety. When the way he handled every room he walked into had made her feel that being beside him was the same as being protected. She understood now what she had not understood then. There is a difference between a man who protects you and a man who controls you. A man who controls you wants to be the only door, the only exit, the only source of everything you need, so that when he decides you are no longer useful, taking everything away is easy, because he was everything. Victor had been everything, and now he was nothing. And the terrifying part was not the anger which she expected to come later, or the grief which was already here and enormous. The terrifying part was the freedom underneath all of it, the strange vertiginous sensation of a woman who has just discovered that the cage she was living in was invisible, and that the door was never actually locked. She fell asleep finally somewhere in the gray hours before dawn. She did not dream about Victor. She dreamed about rain falling on an empty road, and someone crouching in front of her and saying calmly, as if it were simple, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, "I'm going to help you stand up." Is that all right?" She did not see Lucian the next morning. Daria brought breakfast and showed her the parts of the house she was permitted to use freely and told her that she was a guest and would be treated as one, which in this house apparently meant that no one asked her questions. She wasn't ready to answer, and no one stood between her and the door if she chose to leave. "He said I could leave," Amelia said. "He said the decision about what happens next is yours," Daria said. Those were his exact words. She repeated them in her head. "The decision about what happens next is yours." She had not heard a sentence like that in a very long time. It took her 2 days to stop flinching at sounds she couldn't immediately identify. It took her 3 days to be able to eat a full meal without stopping halfway through because her stomach was too tightly wound. It took her 4 days to stop waking up at 3 in the morning, certain that Victor was standing in the room. On the 5th day, she asked Daria where Lucian was. "He has a meeting this afternoon," Daria said. "He'll be in his study by evening if you want to speak with him." She went to his study at 7 o'clock. He was at his desk reading something when she knocked. He looked up. He did not look surprised to see her, but he also did not look like he had been expecting her. He looked like a man who had learned not to attach expectations to things he could not control. "Sit down," he said. And then before she could, he said, "Please, if you want to. You don't have to." She sat. There was a moment of quiet between them that was not uncomfortable exactly, but had weight to it. "I want to know what you found," she said. He looked at her steadily. "About your husband. About what he did. With my name. With those documents. I need to understand what I'm actually involved in." Something shifted in his expression. Not reluctance. More like someone who is deciding whether the person in front of them is ready for the truth, and deciding that the only respectful answer is yes. "Your husband has been working with a network that uses American citizen identities to legitimize overseas financial transfers," Lucian said. "Shell companies in several jurisdictions. The money moves through legitimate-looking businesses, and the person whose name is on the accounts appears on paper to be the owner. If investigators start asking questions, they ask those people first." "They ask me first," Amelia said. "Yes." She felt the room tilt slightly the way it had been doing periodically since the night on the road. "How long?" she said. "The accounts were opened 3 years ago." 3 years. She had been sitting across from Victor at dinner and sleeping beside him and trying to understand why he was distant and wondering what she was doing wrong for 3 years, while her name was on criminal accounts she knew nothing about. "He was never going to tell me," she said. "No, and if everything collapsed, if someone started investigating, he would have presented you as the primary account holder," Lucian said. "Someone he trusted with his finances, someone who made decisions without his knowledge." "He would have said it was me," she said. "He would have given them me." Lucian said nothing. His silence was not the silence of Victor, which was a weapon. It was the silence of a man who understands that some truths land better when they are not surrounded by other words. "How do you know all of this?" she asked. "Your husband operates in the same city I operate in," he said. "I make it my business to understand who is doing what and why. Victor Carter has been a complication for me for some time. Not directly, but indirectly the network he works with has created situations I've had to address." She looked at him. "So I'm not just someone you found on a road," she said. "You are someone I found on a road," he said. "That part is true. Everything I just told you, I would have told you regardless of who your husband was. Because you have a right to understand what was done to you." She believed him. She was not entirely sure why she believed him, given that she was sitting in the private study of a man who ran criminal operations of his own, and who had reasons to want leverage over her husband that had nothing to do with protecting her. But she believed him, maybe because he was the only person in the past 5 days who had spoken to her as if she were capable of handling the truth. "What happens to Victor?" she said. "That depends," Lucian said carefully, "on what you want to happen." She stared at him. "You're asking me." "You're the one he wronged," he said. "I'm not in the habit of making decisions about people's lives without consulting them, especially not the person whose life is most affected." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't want him hurt," she said finally. "I know that might seem—" "It doesn't seem like anything," Lucian said. "It's your choice." "But I want what he did exposed," she said. "The documents, the accounts with my name on them. I want it on record that I had no knowledge of any of it. I want my name cleared." "That," Lucian said, "I can do." She looked at her hands, then she looked up at him. "Why are you helping me?" she said. He was quiet for a moment before he answered. "Because someone left you on a road in my city," he said. "And I have a rule about that. A personal rule that has nothing to do with business." He paused. "And because every person who ends up in a situation like yours got there because someone they trusted decided their needs were less important than their usefulness. I've seen it before. I don't like it." She thought about that. She thought about how strange it was that the man with the reputation for ruthlessness was the one who had asked whether she needed a hospital before he asked her a single question about her husband. The one who had given her warm rooms and space to breathe and told her the decision about what happened next was hers. She thought about 7 years with a man who everyone had told her was a good man, a successful man, a man who loved her, and who had turned out to be none of those things. She thought about how the thing that broke you could come wrapped in everything you thought you wanted. She thought about the cold pavement. She thought about someone crouching in the rain and asking if she was all right before anything else. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. Outside the study window, the city spread out in all directions, full of people living lives that would continue, regardless of what was happening in this room. And somewhere in one part of it, Victor Carter was moving through his evening, the way a man does when he believes a problem has been handled, when he believes he has put the right things in place and that the world will behave the way he needs it to behave. He did not know yet. He did not know that she was alive and warm and sitting in the study of the one man in the city whose name made careful people very careful indeed. He did not know that the liability had become something else entirely. He did not know that the thing he had thrown away had not broken when it landed. He would find out. But not tonight. Tonight, Amelia Carter sat across from Lucian Moretti and learned for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember that someone asking her what she wanted was not a trick. And that was enough. For tonight, that was more than enough. She did not tell Lucian everything that first night in his study. She told him enough. She told him about the folder, the forged signatures, the way Victor had looked at her in the car before he unlocked the door. She told him about the word liability and how it had sounded coming from a man who had kissed her at their wedding and told her in front of everyone they knew that she was the best decision he had ever made. But there were things she kept back. Not because she was protecting Victor. She was done protecting Victor. She kept them back because some wounds are too raw to touch with language the first time, and because she had spent 7 years explaining herself to a man who was not listening. And she needed to sit with the knowledge that the man across from her was actually paying attention before she could trust herself to speak without breaking apart. Lucian did not push. That was the thing that undid her more than anything else he could have done. He simply closed the folder on his desk, folded his hands, and waited. As if her silence was not an obstacle, but a thing he was willing to hold space for. She went back to her room that night and sat in the chair by the window for a long time, thinking about what patience looks like when it is real versus when it is strategy. She had seen Victor be patient. Victor's patience was a coil, something that gathered tension until it released, and the release was never soft. Lucian's patience felt different. It felt like someone who had learned at some point that forcing things only broke them, and who had decided that broken things were not what he wanted. She fell asleep in the chair. She woke up with a blanket over her shoulders that had not been there when she sat down. She did not ask who had put it there. She already knew. And the knowing of it sat in her chest like something small and bright that she was not ready to name. The second week was different from the first. The first week she had moved through the mansion like a woman still waiting to wake up from something. She had eaten when food appeared and slept when her body forced her, and spent the hours in between trying to remember who she was before Victor Carter had decided she was his. The second week, she started getting angry. It came on gradually, the way a tide comes in, not all at once, but in incremental movements that you don't notice until suddenly the water is at your ankles and then your knees, and you realize it has been happening for a while. She was eating breakfast on a Tuesday morning when she looked down at her hands and thought about the documents with her forged signature, and felt a heat start somewhere in the center of her chest that was nothing like grief and nothing like fear. It was fury. Clean and clear and righteous the way fury is when it has a legitimate target. She put down her fork and went to find Daria. "I need to know everything," she said. "Everything he found out about Victor. Everything there is to know about those accounts and what my name was used for. I need to understand it completely." Daria looked at her for a moment. "I'll arrange a meeting with Mr. Moretti," she said. "Good," Amelia said. "And Daria, I need a laptop. I need access to financial databases. I need to be able to look at this myself, not just be told about it." Daria's expression shifted in a way that Amelia was beginning to recognize as the closest the woman got to being impressed. "I'll have it set up this afternoon," she said. The meeting with Lucian happened that evening. He came into the room where she had set up her materials, and he stopped when he saw what she had already put together: printed pages of financial structures, handwritten notes, connections drawn between company names and account numbers, and transaction dates, and he was quiet for a moment before he sat down across from her. "You work fast," he said. "I'm angry," she said. "Angry is faster than scared." He looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes that she couldn't quite read. "Good," he said, and he said it like he meant it. "What do you need from me?" "Confirmation," she said. "I think I've tracked 3 of the shell companies back to a holding group registered in Cyprus. But 2 of the transaction chains break off, and I can't find where they reconnect. I think they were routed through a different identity. I think there are other people whose names were used the same way mine was." He was quiet for a moment. Then he slid a thin folder across the table. She opened it. 4 names. 4 people who had no idea that their identities had been borrowed by Victor Carter's network to move money through accounts they had never opened. Her stomach turned. "He did this to other people," she said. "Yes." "How long?" "We believe the network has been operational for 5 years, Lucian said. "Your accounts were among the more recent additions. We think that's partly because you were available. Your name is legally connected to his through marriage, and partly because by the time they added your identity, the network was large enough to need additional buffer. Someone to stand between the core operations and any investigators who came looking." "A human shield?" she said flatly. "Effectively, yes." She stared at the 4 names in the folder. She thought about 4 other people sitting in their own lives, completely unaware, building futures on ground that had been quietly hollowed out beneath them. "These people need to be warned," she said. "We're working on that." "Working on it isn't good enough. They need to know now. They need to be able to protect themselves. Amelia." He said her name in a way that was neither a correction nor a dismissal. Just a signal that she needed to listen to what came next. "If we move too fast, Victor destroys the evidence. He has protocols in place. The moment he knows someone is looking, everything goes dark. We need to be careful. We need to be strategic." She wanted to argue. She looked at his face and recognized something there. Not manipulation, not the particular expression of a man who is telling you to be patient because it suits him for you to be still, but the expression of someone who has done this before, who knows what happens when you move before you're ready. "Okay," she said, "then tell me what being strategic looks like. Because I am not going to sit here being safe while other people are exposed." "It looks like building a case that he cannot escape," Lucian said. "Not just financially, legally, completely, so that when it falls on him, it falls all at once and there is nowhere for him to go." He paused. "And it looks like making sure your name is clean before his name is destroyed, because if investigators move on him before your involvement is formally explained, You become a suspect by association. She had not thought about that. She had been so focused on Victor's guilt that she had not fully reckoned with the fact that her name was on those accounts. That to someone looking in from the outside, she looked like a participant rather than a victim. "How do we clear my name?" she said. "We document everything," he said. "The timeline of when the accounts were opened and where you were at those times. Evidence that your signature was forged. Witnesses who can confirm you had no knowledge of your husband's financial arrangements." He looked at her steadily. "And we need the original documents. The ones from his office. Did you take them with you that night?" Her heart dropped. "No," she said. I left them in the kitchen. I was so—" She stopped. She thought about the folders sitting on the counter between them. "Victor has them. Does he know you read them thoroughly? Or does he think you saw enough to frighten you, but not enough to understand the full scope?" She thought about the conversation in the kitchen. What she had said. What she had revealed. Whether she had given away how much she actually understood before he had decided to drive her out of the city. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I was upset. I may have said less than I thought I was saying." "Then there's a possibility the originals are still in his possession," Lucian said. "Which means there's a way to get to them before he realizes how much you know." She looked at him. "You're going to go into his house," she said. "Someone is going to recover certain documents," he said carefully. "Whether they originated in his house or elsewhere is a detail I'll keep to myself for now." "That's breaking and entering." "That's correcting an imbalance," he said. "But if it makes you feel better, we can call it something else." She sat back. She looked at this man, this careful, controlled, quietly powerful man, who ran operations that existed outside the law and who had picked her up off a wet road and given her warmth and space and the radical experience of being asked what she wanted before anyone decided what to do with her. "You're a complicated person," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "You do things that are not legal." "Yes." "And you still picked me up off the road." "Those two facts are not in conflict," he said. "I have my own system of what is and isn't acceptable. It doesn't map neatly onto the legal code, but it is consistent." She was quiet for a moment. "The people whose names are in that folder," she said. "When this is over, when Victor is exposed, will they know what happened to them?" "Yes," he said. "I'll make sure of it." She nodded. She looked back at her notes, at the lines and arrows and account numbers and company names, at the map of something ugly that had been built using pieces of people who never agreed to be building materials. "Okay," she said. "Tell me what I can do that actually helps." For the first time since she had known him 8 days, which felt simultaneously like a week and a lifetime, she saw something that was almost a smile cross Lucian Moretti's face. "Start with the Cyprus connection," he said. "I think you're right about the holding group. I want to see how far back you can trace it." She turned back to her laptop. He did not leave immediately. He stayed at the table across from her, working through his own materials, and for the next 2 hours they sat in the same room doing separate things that were aimed at the same target. And there was something in that, in the simple, unremarkable fact of two people working together, without anyone having to perform or justify or explain themselves, that felt more like partnership than anything she had experienced in 7 years of marriage. She did not say that out loud, but she felt it. And she thought he did too, from the way he occasionally looked up from his own work and checked on her progress without asking if she was all right, which would have been condescending. He just looked, as if confirming she was still there was enough. She called her sister on the 11th day. Her sister's name was Clara, and she was 2 years younger than Amelia, and had never trusted Victor, but had been too kind to say so directly, which Amelia had resented at the time, and now recognized as the purest form of love she had received during her marriage. Someone who saw the truth and chose to stay close rather than push her away with it. The call lasted 40 minutes. Clara cried for the first 10 of them, which made Amelia cry, which she had not done since the first night in the car, not because she wasn't grieving, but because grief had been waiting in line behind shock and anger, and the practical need to understand what she was dealing with. "Where are you?" Clara said. "You can come here. You can come right now. I'll come get you." I'm safe, Amelia said. I'm somewhere safe. I need to stay here for a little while longer. Amelia, tell me where you are. I can't explain all of it right now, but Clara, did Victor call you after? She stopped. She didn't know exactly how to phrase it. The night he left me on the road felt both too clinical and too enormous. He called the day after you disappeared, Clara said. He said you had walked out, that you'd found some documents for his business and misunderstood them, and that you'd left in a panic and he was worried about you. Of course that was the story. The wife who overreacted. The wife who didn't understand business and ran off in an emotional state. The wife who needed to be found and calmed down and brought home before she could do any damage. What did you say? Amelia asked. I told him that if you had walked out, you had a reason, Clara said, and that he should think carefully about what that reason was before he called me again. Amelia pressed her hand over her eyes. Clara, she said. I know, Clara said. I know, honey. I know. They stayed on the phone like that for a few minutes, not saying much, just breathing in the same rhythm the way they had as children, sharing a room, and Amelia held on to that sound like something she had been missing for a very long time. When she hung up, she sat for a moment with the phone in her hands. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway and looked up expecting Daria. It was Lucian. He paused when he saw her face. Bad news, he said. No, she said. Good news, actually. The kind that makes you cry. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he came in and sat in the chair across from her and did not say anything, which was exactly the right thing. After a moment, she said, Victor told my sister I walked out, that I misunderstood documents and panicked and left. That's his version, Lucian said. That will be his version in every room he walks into, with every person we know. He'll tell it clean and consistent, and everyone will believe it, because he's believable when he needs to be. That's the thing about Victor. He is incredibly believable. She looked at her hands. He believed it himself, I think. I think somewhere in his head that is genuinely what happened. His wife overreacted. His wife didn't understand. His wife complicated things unnecessarily. He had to manage the situation. That's a story a man tells himself so he doesn't have to look at what he actually did, Lucian said. I know, she said. I've been the excuse for his stories a long time. I just didn't know that was what I was. Lucian leaned forward slightly. His voice was quiet and direct. What he told himself and what happened are two different things, he said. And the difference matters. You didn't overreact. You didn't misunderstand. You found evidence of a crime being committed in your name without your consent, and your husband's response was to drive you to an isolated location and leave you there. That is not a man who made a mistake under pressure. That is a man who made a choice and believed he could live with it. She looked at him. You talk about him like you've thought about this before, she said. I have, Lucian said simply. Because of the network, because of the business problems he's caused you. He was quiet for a moment. Initially, he said, yes, Victor Carter was a name I knew for business reasons, but that night on the road that changed what this was for me. Personally. He said the word carefully, as if it was something he did not use often and wanted to be accurate with. I've seen people use power badly. I've seen men decide that the people around them are resources rather than human beings. I've been in that world my entire adult life. But there is a particular kind of ugliness in a man who takes someone who loved him and uses that love as a mechanism. I don't have patience for it. You have your own rules, she said, echoing what Daria had told her that first night. I have my own rules, he confirmed. She nodded slowly. Then she said, I want to start learning how to protect myself, not just legally. I want to know how to actually defend myself if something happens. If Victor... She stopped. If things don't go smoothly and he decides to try something different. Lucian looked at her for a long moment. Daria is trained, he said. She'll work with you if you want. I want, she said. Then I'll tell her. He stood. Before he reached the door, she said, Lucian. He turned. Thank you, she said. Not for I know you're doing some of this for your own reasons, but for the parts that are just about me. For treating me like someone whose decisions matter." She paused. I'd forgotten what that felt like. He looked at her steadily. "You shouldn't have had to forget," he said. He left. She sat for a while longer in the quiet room. She thought about the version of herself that had married Victor Carter and thought she was the luckiest woman in any room. She thought about the years of slowly adjusting her own perceptions to match his of learning to doubt herself the way he doubted her of becoming smaller and quieter and more apologetic, because it was easier than fighting a current that never stopped pushing. She thought about the woman she had been before Victor. She thought about whether that woman was still in there somewhere waiting, or whether she had been replaced so gradually that there was no going back. She decided she didn't want to go back. She wanted to go forward. And the woman who was going to go forward was going to be different from the woman who had walked into that marriage. Harder in some places. More certain of her own edges. Less willing to make herself smaller to fit into someone else's design. That woman was starting right now. The training with Daria was not what she expected. She had expected a clinical process, something detached and technical. What she got instead was Daria standing across from her in a large room with clear floors and telling her in a calm and matter-of-fact voice that the first thing she was going to learn was how to fall properly. "Most people get hurt because they don't know how to absorb impact," Daria said. "They fight the fall. We're going to learn to work with it instead." "That's a metaphor for a lot of things," Amelia said. Daria looked at her. "It is," she said. "I've thought that myself." They worked for 2 hours. Amelia's whole body hurt by the end of it, but it was the clean kind of hurt muscles that had been asked to do something new, and had done it, not the blunt, trapped hurt of having no control over what was happening to her body. She went back to her room and lay flat on the floor, because the bed felt too soft after 2 hours of hard floor, and she stared at the ceiling and thought about falling and landing and getting up again. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at it. Then she answered it because she had spent enough of her life being afraid of information. "Amelia!" Victor's voice. Smooth, calibrated. The voice he used when he was managing a situation, the voice that was warm enough to mistake for genuine, if you weren't listening for the calculation underneath. "I know you're alive. I know you're somewhere in the city. I just want to talk." She sat up slowly. Her heart was doing something sharp and rapid in her chest, but her voice came out even. "You have nothing I want to talk about," she said. "That's not true. We have 7 years to talk about. We have a life. We have things that belong to both of us that need to be sorted out properly. I don't want things to end badly." "They already ended badly," she said. "You drove me to an empty road in the rain and told me I was a liability. That's how they ended." A pause. "I made a mistake," he said. "I was under extraordinary pressure and I handled it badly. That's on me. But whatever you think you know about those documents, you don't have the full picture. There are things I couldn't tell you at the time. Security concerns. People involved who you don't want to know you know about them. Amelia, I was trying to protect you." She almost laughed. She would have laughed, except that there was a time not long ago, a matter of weeks, when that sentence would have worked on her. When she would have heard "I was trying to protect you," and felt a complicated rush of guilt and relief, and the exhausted gratitude of someone who has been waiting to be told that the thing that hurt them was actually love with poor timing. "Victor," she said, "I need you to hear me. I know exactly what those documents are. I know about the holding company in Cyprus. I know about the accounts opened in my name 3 years ago. I know about the network." She kept her voice flat and steady. "I know everything. And I want you to know that I know, so that whatever you are planning to say next, you're saying it to someone who doesn't need to be managed anymore." The silence on the other end lasted long enough that she could hear him breathing. "Who have you been talking to?" he said. And his voice was different now. The warmth was gone. What was underneath it was not something she wanted to spend time with. "That's not your information," she said. "Amelia, don't contact me again," she said. Don't contact my sister. Don't contact anyone who knows me. If you have things to say to me, say them through an attorney, because that's the only communication I'm interested in having with you." She hung up. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear. She recognized the difference now. This was adrenaline. This was the physical consequence of having done something that required courage, and actually doing it. Her body was processing the aftermath of holding her ground against the person who had spent 7 years making her feel like the ground didn't belong to her. She sat there for a full minute, letting herself shake. Then she put the phone down and breathed. Then she picked the phone back up and called Lucian. He answered on the second ring. "Victor called me," she said. "Unknown number." "I know, we flagged it." "No accusation. No, I told you so. Just information." "What did he say?" "He said he made a mistake. He said he was trying to protect me. He said I don't have the full picture." She paused. "He changed his tone when I told him I knew about Cyprus." "Good," Lucian said. "That's what we needed." "What do you mean?" "We needed him to know that you know," Lucian said. "Not because it's safe for you, it isn't, and I want you to know that I'm aware of that, but because a man like Victor Carter moves differently when he's afraid. He makes mistakes. He contacts people he shouldn't contact. He tries to accelerate timelines that weren't ready to move yet. When he does that, he leaves traces." A pause. "You let him know you were informed. That was the right thing. I just wish you'd told me you were going to do it." "I didn't decide to do it," she said. "He called, and I answered, and it came out." Another pause. "You did well," he said. She closed her eyes briefly. "He's going to try something now," she said. "Yes," Lucian said. "He is, which is why from tonight your security detail is doubled, and you don't go anywhere in the house without someone who knows about it. Not because you can't make your own choices. Because the choices you made already have consequences, and I intend to make sure you're standing when those consequences arrive." She thought about pushing back on this. She thought about the instinct she had, the trained 7-year-old instinct of a woman who had learned to resist whenever a man told her what she was doing, to point out that she was capable of assessing her own safety. But this was not the same thing. She knew the difference now. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. She hesitated. "Did you think I would fight you on that?" she said. "I thought it was possible," he said. "I wouldn't have blamed you if you had." "I'm choosing not to," she said. "That's different from being told I have no choice." There was a pause on the line. "Yes," Lucian said. "It is different. Thank you for explaining that." She almost smiled. She was not sure what to do with a man who said thank you when she corrected him. She was not sure what to do with a man who learned. She was not sure what to do with a lot of things about Lucian Moretti. And she had the dim awareness that her uncertainty was the first healthy uncertainty she had felt in a very long time. Not the anxious uncertainty of a woman who doesn't know what her husband is feeling and is afraid of getting it wrong, but the open, unfamiliar uncertainty of someone standing at the edge of something new and not yet knowing its shape. She did not pursue the thought. There were more immediate things to pursue. Victor was afraid. Victor was moving. And for the first time in their long history, Amelia Carter was not running in front of him. She was waiting. She was ready. And she was not alone. 3 days after the phone call, Lucian's people recovered the original documents from Victor's office. She did not ask exactly how. She did not need to know the details of how a thing was done in order to be grateful it was done. And she had learned enough in the past 2 weeks to understand that there were aspects of Lucian's operations that ran more smoothly when she didn't require a full accounting of the methodology. What she did need to know was what the documents showed. She spent 6 hours going through them with Lucian and a woman named Renata, who was a forensic accountant who worked with Lucian on financial matters and who had the efficient, precise energy of someone who sees patterns in numbers the way other people see shapes in clouds, effortlessly, automatically, with quiet confidence. "The signature forgery is clean," Renata said. "Whoever did it was good, but good is not perfect. If you look here, she pointed, and Amelia leaned in. The pressure variation on the pen strokes is inconsistent with your other signed documents. Someone who knows what they're looking at will see it. Can you prove it's not her signature? Lucian asked. I can produce an analysis that makes a strong case, Renata said. Combined with a timeline showing her location on the dates the documents were signed and testimony about her knowledge of the accounts, it becomes very difficult to argue she was a participant rather than a victim. How long? Lucian asked. A week, Renata said. Possibly less. Amelia looked at the documents spread across the table, at the fake signatures that bore her name, at the evidence of 3 years of a man carefully building a cage around her one forged line at a time. She thought about what Lucian had said the night they had gone through the folder together. That Victor had not abandoned her because of anger. That he had planned it. That she was not his partner. She was his escape plan. She had known it intellectually from that first conversation, but seeing it in the documents, seeing the dates, the careful timing, the systematic construction of it, made it real in a different way. Made it the difference between understanding something and actually knowing it in the place where understanding becomes part of you permanently. He had planned this. He had planned this while she was sitting across from him at breakfast, and asking if he was sleeping enough, and trying to remember the things he liked and the things that made him difficult, so she could navigate around them. He had been building this infrastructure of her destruction, while she was trying to be a better wife to him. The fury that came up in her at that moment was so complete and so clean that it burned off everything else. She was not sad. She was not confused. She was not the woman who sat on the edge of a bed in a strange room holding cold tea and wondering what she had done wrong. She was a woman who had been wronged deliberately and systematically by someone who had calculated that she was too trusting and too afraid and too committed to the life they had built together to ever turn around and make him answer for it. He had calculated wrong. Renata, she said, and her voice came out so controlled and so clear that both Renata and Lucian looked up. I want to be part of this, not as a subject of the investigation, as a participant. I know these documents. I know Victor's patterns. I can help you find things that you might miss because you're looking for financial irregularities, and I'm looking for the man I know. Renata looked at Lucian. Lucian looked at Amelia. All right, he said, and Amelia Carter sat down at the table, pulled the nearest folder toward her, and began. Renata finished the forensic analysis in 5 days, not 7. She came into the room where Amelia and Lucian were working on a Thursday morning, set a bound document on the table between them, and said without preamble, "It's done. The signature analysis is conclusive. Combined with the location records and the account opening documentation, there is no credible argument that Amelia Carter participated knowingly in any of these transactions." She tapped the document twice. This is airtight. Amelia picked it up. She turned to the first page and read the summary paragraph and felt something release in her chest that had been locked down since the night she found the folder, a tension so chronic she had stopped noticing it was there. The way you stop noticing a sound that has been present long enough to become background. Her name was clean. On paper, officially, provably, her name was clean. She set the document down carefully and pressed her palms flat on the table and breathed. "Thank you," she said to Renata. Renata nodded in the efficient way she had, as if gratitude was a transaction she registered but did not require. "The next question is how we use it," she said and looked at Lucian. "We file the preliminary disclosure through my attorney at the end of the week," Lucian said. "That puts the forensic analysis into a legal record before Victor has any idea it exists. Once it's filed, he can't suppress it." He paused. "And once it's filed, he's going to know. Which means the window between now and the end of this week is the most dangerous part." Amelia looked up from the document. "He's going to move," she said. "He's already moving," Lucian said. "My people tracked 3 calls yesterday between Victor and a man named Dale Prescott. Prescott is the financial architect of the network. He's the one who built the shell company structure. He's also the one who would take the most damage if the full picture becomes public." He looked at her directly. "They're not talking about going quiet and hoping this passes. They're talking about going on offense." Against me, she said. Against both of us, Lucian said. Victor knows you're here. He may not know exactly what we've built together over the past 3 weeks, but he knows you're under my protection, and that changes his calculation significantly. He can't come at you directly without coming at me. And coming at me directly would require resources he doesn't have, and allies who won't back him on something this exposed. A pause. So he's going to try a different approach. What approach? Lucian's jaw tightened slightly. It was the smallest tell she had seen from him the first time his control had shown its edges in front of her, and it told her before he said anything that what was coming was something he found genuinely distasteful. He filed a missing persons report 4 days ago, Lucian said. He told investigators that you left the marital home in a disturbed state following a disagreement. He expressed concern for your mental health. He provided documentation fabricated but professionally done, suggesting you have a history of emotional instability and that he has been worried about your well-being for some time. She stared at him. He's trying to make me sound unstable, she said. He's trying to create a record, Lucian said, so that if you come forward with what you know, the first question anyone asks is whether you're credible. Whether this is a troubled woman making accusations against a husband who has been concerned about her, or whether this is a legitimate whistleblower. He paused again. It's a smart move. I don't like saying that, but it is. She thought about Victor sitting across from her at a table somewhere in a room she used to know, building a paper version of a wife who was fragile and confused and not to be believed. Choosing details, adding texture, making it convincing the way he made everything convincing. The fury came back, cleaner and colder than it had been before. He's been planning this since the night he drove me out there, she said. Since before that, I think, Lucian said. The documentation he filed is too complete to have been assembled in 3 weeks. Some of this groundwork was laid months ago, which means he had a contingency in place for the possibility that you might find out, or that something else might go wrong. He looked at her steadily. He wasn't just using your name on those accounts as a legal maneuver. He had a full story ready for the moment you became a liability. The liability protocol already existed. You triggered it. She sat very still. She thought about the months before the night she found the folder. About Victor being slightly more attentive than usual. About small conversations she had flagged internally as strange and then explained away. About the time he had asked her casually over dinner, in the way he asked about things he had already decided on, whether she ever felt overwhelmed. Whether the pace of their life was too much for her. Whether she ever thought about talking to someone. She had thought he was being considerate. She had been moved by it. She said very quietly, "He was building the record, while I was sitting at the same table with him. He was asking me questions designed to give him material to use later, and I thought he was checking in on me." Lucian said nothing. His silence this time was not gentle. It was the silence of someone who is angry on someone else's behalf and choosing not to let that anger fill the room because the room belongs to the person it happened to. "Okay," she said. The word came out like something closing. Like a door. "What do we do?" "We accelerate," Lucian said. "Filing at the end of the week is no longer fast enough. We file tomorrow morning, and we add something to the disclosure that changes the shape of the story before he can control the narrative." "What do we add?" "You," he said. "Your statement. Not just the forensic analysis your testimony on record documented describing the timeline of events from the night you found the folder to now. Including the phone call where he confirmed knowledge of the accounts. Including the fact that he drove you to an isolated location and left you there after telling you that you were a liability." She felt the weight of that, standing up publicly, putting her name and her voice on a document that would be read by people with authority, becoming the kind of person who goes on record. She had spent 7 years being invisible inside her own marriage. She was not sure she remembered how to take up that kind of space, but she thought about the 4 names in that folder. The 4 people whose identities had been used the same way hers had been. She thought about them sitting in their lives right now, unknowing, unprotected. She thought about Victor somewhere in the city preparing to tell the world that his wife was unstable. She thought about who gets believed and who doesn't, and how the answer to that question is almost always determined before anyone opens their mouth based on who had the foresight to set the terms first. "I'll write the statement tonight," she said. "Renata will help you structure it," Lucian said. "I know how to write," she said, not sharply, just clearly. He looked at her. "Yes," he said, "you do." She wrote for 4 hours. She did not write as someone defending herself. She had considered that approach and rejected it because defense requires you to accept the framing of the accusation, and she did not accept Victor's framing of anything. She wrote as someone documenting events in sequence clearly and precisely the way a person writes who knows that clarity is its own authority. She wrote about finding the folder. She wrote about the kitchen, the counter, the folder between them. She wrote about the drive and the road and the word liability. She wrote about the phone call where Victor had confirmed without meaning to that he knew exactly what those accounts were and what her name was doing on them. She wrote about the forged signatures and what the forensic analysis had found. She wrote without adjectives that described her own emotions because she had learned somewhere in those 4 hours that the most devastating thing a document can do is present facts without telling the reader how to feel about them. When the facts are bad enough, the reader's own feelings are more powerful than anything you can manufacture for them. She finished at 2 in the morning. She read it back once. Then she walked down the hallway to Lucian's study because the light was still on under the door, which she had come to understand was not unusual. He did not sleep the way other people slept. He managed rest in shorter intervals and spent the hours in between doing whatever it was that kept an operation the size of his running without visible seams. She knocked. "Come in," he said. She pushed the door open and stood in the doorway. "I'm done," she said. He looked up from what he was reading. He looked at her face, not a slow examination, just one direct comprehensive look, the way he had of assessing situations completely in a single moment. "Sit down," he said. She sat. She handed him the pages. He read. He did not read quickly the way people do when they are skimming for the essentials. He read every word. She watched his face while he did it, and saw almost nothing there except the focused neutrality of someone paying close attention, and underneath it, very briefly, something that tightened around his eyes when he reached the part about the word liability. He finished. He set the pages down. "This is very good," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at her. She thought she saw the almost smile again, the one that appeared rarely and briefly, and meant something different each time. This time, it meant something that felt like respect. "Renata will review it in the morning," he said. "But I don't think she'll change much." "I know," Amelia said again. They were quiet for a moment. She should have gotten up and gone to bed. She had been up for almost 20 hours, and her body knew it, even if her mind was still running hard. But she stayed. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "When did you realize this was more than a business problem for you, Victor, and the network and what he did? When did it stop being about the operational complications he was causing you and become something else?" He was quiet for a moment. "The blanket," he said. She blinked. "What?" "The first night. You fell asleep in the chair. Someone covered you." He paused. "It was me. I came to check whether you needed anything, and you were asleep sitting up still dressed, and you looked like someone who had been holding themselves together so hard for so long that the moment your body got permission to stop, it stopped completely." He looked at her directly. "I put the blanket over you and stood there for a minute longer than I needed to. And I thought about the man who had left you on that road, and something shifted." She did not say anything for a moment. "You didn't have to tell me that," she said. "No." He agreed. "Why did you—" He considered the question with the care he gave most things. "Because you wrote 4 hours of truth tonight," he said. "It felt wrong to give you anything less." She looked at him across the desk, across the distance of everything they were, and everything they were not yet, and everything that existed between the life she had just left, and whatever came next, and thought that she had been so wrong for so long about what safety looked like, that she had almost forgotten. Safety was a real thing, and not just a story people told themselves. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow is going to move fast." She stood. At the door she stopped. "Lucian," she said. He looked up. "I don't trust easily," she said. "I want you to know that I'm aware this is not a small thing. What I'm doing, being here, trusting the process we've built. I know it's not small, and I'm doing it anyway." He held her gaze. "I know," he said. "I don't take it lightly." She nodded. She went to bed. She slept the deep and dreamless sleep of someone who has made a decision they are at peace with. They filed at 9 o'clock the next morning. By 11, Lucian's attorney confirmed the disclosure had been received and time-stamped into the legal record. By noon, Victor Carter knew. She was in the kitchen with Daria when Lucian walked in with his phone in his hand, and that particular stillness on his face that meant something significant had moved. "He knows," Lucian said. He called Prescott 6 minutes after the filing registered. Prescott called 2 other members of the network in the following 12 minutes. The calls are being monitored. He set his phone on the counter. "They are not calm." "Good," Amelia said. Daria set a cup of coffee in front of her without being asked. "What happens now?" Amelia said. "Now we wait," Lucian said. "Not long. Victor's going to do one of 3 things. He's going to try to reach you directly again. He's going to try to reach someone around you, your sister, someone from your previous life, someone he thinks he can use as a conduit to get to you. Or he's going to try to escalate with the missing persons report and push for a welfare check that gives him a legal reason to know where you are." "Option 3 is the most dangerous," she said. "Option 3 is the most inconvenient," he corrected. "Dangerous is my concern. Inconvenient is yours." He looked at her carefully. "Is there anything or anyone from your previous life that Victor could use? Anyone who might still be in contact with him? Anyone who might believe his version of things well enough to reach out to you on his behalf?" She thought about it seriously. She thought about the friends she had had before Victor, and the way that social circle had gradually compressed during the marriage until most of the people in it were people Victor had approved of, which she had told herself was natural and now understood was architecture. She thought about the acquaintances and the colleagues and the mutual contacts who had Victor's ear far more than hers. Then she thought about someone specific. "Margaret Hale," she said. Lucian looked at her steadily. "Who is she?" "She was my closest friend when I first moved to the city," Amelia said. "Before Victor. We stayed in touch during the marriage, but it got harder. Victor didn't like her. Said she was a negative influence. I saw her less and less, and eventually it just..." She stopped. She might still believe the version of him he presented to everyone. She might reach out if he contacted her. "When did you last speak to her?" 7 months ago, Amelia said. "She called on my birthday. Victor answered the phone and told her I was unavailable." The sentence sat there. He answered the phone and told her I was unavailable. She had not thought about that moment in months. It had been small enough to file away without examining. He answered the phone, said she was busy, set it down, and when she came in and asked who called, he said wrong number. She had believed him because it was easier to believe him than to believe that he was managing the access other people had to her. That was 7 months ago. She did not know how many times it had happened before that. "He's been isolating you," Lucian said. It was not a question. "Yes," she said. The word came out flat and final. "Systematically. For years, probably. I didn't see it while it was happening." "They rarely do," Lucian said. Not with condescension. With a matter-of-fact weight that told her he had seen this before, that he was naming a pattern rather than cataloging a failure. She thought about Margaret. About 7 months of silence that had not been silence at all, but a door that had been quietly closed without her knowledge. "I need to call her," Amelia said. "Yes," Lucian said. "But I want someone listening in case Victor has already made contact. Not because I don't trust you. Because I want to know what he's told her before you go in without knowing." "Okay," she said. Margaret answered on the third ring. "Amelia." Her voice was immediately complicated, surprised and relieved, and something else, something cautious. The sound of someone who has been told a story about a person they love and is not sure how much of it to believe. "Amelia." "Oh, thank God. Are you okay?" "Victor called me. He said you—" "I know what he said," Amelia said quietly. "I need you to listen to me, Margaret. Not to him, to me. Will you do that?" A pause. "Yes," Margaret said. "Yes, of course. Tell me." She told her. Not everything. Not the full scope of the legal case and the forensic analysis and the network and the shell companies. She told her the human version. She told her about finding the documents and what they contained. She told her about the drive and the road and the word liability. She told her about 7 months ago when Victor answered the phone and told her it was a wrong number. Margaret was quiet for a long time when she finished. Then she said, "He told me you were having a mental health crisis, that you'd become paranoid and confused, and that he was trying to get you help, but you were refusing. He was very believable, Amelia. He's very—" "I know," Amelia said. "He's extraordinarily believable. That's the thing about him. That's always been the thing." "What do you need from me?" Margaret said. And the directness of it. The clean, simple, no hesitation directness of a real friend asking the right question hit Amelia somewhere deep enough that she had to press her free hand to her mouth for a moment before she could answer. "I need you to know the truth," she said. "And I need you to trust it, even though his version was more polished, because my version is the one that actually happened." "I trust it," Margaret said, without hesitation. "I've known you for 15 years. I trust it." She hung up the call and sat for a moment with the phone in both hands. Lucian, who had heard the whole thing, said nothing for several seconds. Then he said, "You have good people in your life." "I lost track of them," she said. "You found one back today," he said. She nodded. She was about to say something else when Lucian's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His expression shifted in the specific way she had come to recognize over the past 3 weeks. Not alarm. Lucian was not a man who alarmed easily, but heightened attention. The look of someone who has received information that requires immediate assessment. "What?" she said. "Victor has retained new legal counsel," Lucian said. "A firm called Hargrove and Associates. You need to know that name." She did know it. The recognition came up through her like cold water. "Hargrove represents the most aggressive corporate litigation teams in the state," she said slowly. "Victor used to mention them. He said they were the firm you hired when you didn't want to win a case you wanted to bury the opposition." "That's accurate," Lucian said. "He's not trying to defend himself," she said. "He's going on offense. He's going to go after the disclosure. He's going to go after me. He's going to go after—" She stopped. "He's going after you." "He's going to try," Lucian said. "Lucian." She held his gaze. "Hargrove doesn't lose. That's their reputation. They don't lose because they don't fight fair. They find pressure points that have nothing to do with the actual case, and they squeeze until the other side makes mistakes." She paused. "What are your pressure points?" He looked at her. "I have a few," he said. "I'm aware of them. I've been aware of them for a long time. My legal team is already anticipating this." "That's not what I asked," she said. "I asked what they are." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Operations that exist in gray areas, financial arrangements that are not illegal but are not entirely transparent. And you." She stared at him. "Me. The moment Hargrove starts digging, they are going to find that you are living in my house, and that I have been personally involved in building the case against your husband. They are going to characterize this as something it is not. They are going to suggest that you are not a victim seeking justice, but a woman operating in conspiracy with a known criminal figure to destroy her husband for personal and financial reasons." He said it evenly. "It will be a very compelling story for certain audiences." She felt the shape of it settle over her. She thought about what it looked like from the outside. A missing wife who turned up in the home of a mafia boss. A legal disclosure built with the resources of an organization that operated outside the law. A woman whose husband claimed was unstable, now participating in a coordinated legal action against him from inside the home of his most dangerous enemy. Victor had not chosen Hargrove because he thought he could win. He had chosen Hargrove because he wanted to make winning cost too much. "He's going to try to make me look like your weapon," she said. "Yes," Lucian said. "So what do we do?" "We separate the narratives," he said. "The forensic case stands entirely independent of me or my involvement. Renata's analysis, your testimony, the documented timeline, none of that requires any connection to me to be credible. It exists on its own terms. What we need to do is make that separation explicit before Hargrove has the chance to draw the connection for a judge. I need to be somewhere else when this moves forward," she said. He held her gaze. "It would help," he said carefully. "Not permanently, not because you are not safe here, but because the narrative of you being here is going to be weaponized against the credibility of everything you've built, and what you've built is too important to let Victor poison it with questions about who you've been staying with." She sat with that for a moment. The thought of leaving the mansion, of leaving the warm rooms, and Daria's steady practicality, and Lucian's even voice at the end of a long day settled uncomfortably. She had not expected that. She had expected to feel relieved. She had expected the instinct to be toward independence, toward her own space, toward the next stage of rebuilding herself outside the walls of someone else's protection. She had been working toward that consciously every day for 3 weeks, but the discomfort of the idea of leaving told her something she was not ready to examine too closely. "When?" she said. 2 days, he said. "Enough time to set up somewhere secure. Somewhere that's yours, not connected to me." "Clara," she said. "I could go to Clara. A family member's home is the cleanest option," he said. "It normalizes the narrative. A woman who discovered her husband's crimes and went to stay with her sister is an entirely different story than a woman who went to stay with a mafia boss." "Which one is true?" she said. "Both," he said. "The difference is, which one serves you?" She nodded. She called Clara that afternoon. Clara said yes before Amelia finished the sentence asking. She spent the next 2 days organizing what she had built, the research materials, the copies of every document, the analysis, her own testimony into a form that she could take with her and continue working with from wherever she was. Renata would continue the legal coordination. The disclosure was already filed. The machinery was in motion and did not require her to be in any specific location to keep running. She was packing the last of her things on the morning she was supposed to leave when Lucian appeared in the doorway. She looked at him. Something about the image of him standing there in the doorway while she was getting ready to leave felt different from every other time she had seen him standing somewhere. She wasn't sure why. She had been in this mansion for 3 weeks, and she had seen him in many doorways. But something about this particular doorway and this particular morning felt like a threshold that was not just architectural. "You have everything you need," he said. "Renata's number, my attorney's number, copies of everything." She paused. "Yes." He nodded. "Victor's people have been watching your sister's neighborhood," he said. "My people will be watching Victor's people. You won't see them, but they'll be there." "I know," she said. She meant it as a thank you, and something in his face received it that way. She picked up her bag. She crossed the room. She stopped in front of him, which meant she was close enough to see the small lines around his eyes, and the particular set of his jaw that she had learned meant he was holding something steady that wanted to move. "When this is over," she said, "when everything is resolved, and my name is clear, and Victor is out of both our lives, I want to have a conversation that isn't about any of this." He looked at her. "What kind of conversation?" he said. "I'm not sure yet," she said honestly. "But I want to have it. With you." He held her gaze for a moment that was neither short nor long, but was completely still. "Okay," he said. She walked out the door. The car was waiting. She got in and did not look back at the mansion, not because she was disciplining herself not to, but because she understood somewhere certain and quiet inside her that looking back was not the direction she needed to be looking. She was going forward. She was going toward her sister, and her statement, and the legal machinery that was already grinding toward Victor Carter's carefully constructed world. She was going toward a confrontation she had not chosen, but was no longer afraid of. And somewhere behind her, Lucian Moretti stood in a doorway and watched the car until it turned the corner and disappeared. His phone was already in his hand. He was already making calls. Because Victor Carter had hired the most aggressive litigation firm in the state, which meant the timeline had moved, which meant the confrontation that Amelia thought was still weeks away was going to arrive much sooner than either of them had planned. Victor was done waiting. He was coming, and this time he was not coming to apologize. Clara's apartment was nothing like the mansion. It was small and warm and slightly cluttered in the way that spaces get when someone actually lives in them, rather than maintaining them for appearance, and it smelled like the lavender candles Clara had burned since college, and the specific coffee blend she had ordered from the same small roaster for the past 12 years. Amelia walked through the front door, and Clara grabbed her before she could set her bag down and held on with both arms, and neither of them said anything for a long moment, because there was nothing that needed to be said first. They stood in the entryway and held each other. When Clara finally pulled back, she looked at her sister's face with the particular thoroughness of someone taking inventory, checking for damage, the way you check a thing you love that has been through something. "You look different," Clara said. "I am different," Amelia said. "Different how?" Amelia thought about how to answer that. She thought about the woman who had driven away from the mansion that morning and the woman who had first arrived there 3.5 weeks earlier, kneeling on wet pavement with nowhere to go. "Angrier," she said. "And cleaner, like something that was blurry came into focus." Clara nodded slowly. "I can see that," she said. "I think I like it." "I think I do too," Amelia said. "Most of the time." They sat at the kitchen table, and Amelia walked her sister through everything she had not been able to explain on the phone. The full scope of it. The shell companies, and the forged signatures, and Renata's forensic analysis, and the disclosure that had already been filed. She told Clara about Hargrove and Associates, and what their involvement meant. She told her about the missing persons report and the mental health narrative Victor had been building, and the methodical way he had apparently for years been laying groundwork for the possibility that she might one day become inconvenient. Clara listened without interrupting, which was the hardest thing Clara ever did because she was not by nature someone who listened without interrupting. She listened with her hands wrapped around her coffee mug and her jaw getting progressively tighter as the story moved forward. When Amelia finished, Clara said, "I want to say something very negative about Victor Carter." "Say it," Amelia said. Clara said it. It was specific, and it was comprehensive, and it was exactly what the situation warranted, and Amelia felt something loosen in her chest that she had not realized was still wound tight. The particular relief of having someone who loves you be appropriately furious on your behalf, without you having to perform gratitude for their restraint. "Okay," Clara said when she was done. "What do you need from me?" "Exactly what you're already doing," Amelia said. "A place to be that isn't his world and isn't—" She paused. "And isn't somewhere else that would complicate the case." Clara looked at her with the particular precision that younger sisters develop when they have spent a lifetime paying attention to a person who thinks they are unreadable. "Who is he?" Clara said. Amelia looked at her. "The someone else you're not mentioning," Clara said. "The somewhere else." "It's not," Amelia started. "Don't," Clara said gently. "Don't explain it away before I've even asked a question. Just tell me who he is." Amelia set down her coffee. She told Clara about Lucian. Not the way she would have explained him to a stranger with qualifications and context and careful framing. She told her the way you tell someone you trust about something you haven't entirely sorted out yourself honestly with the unfinished edges showing. She told her about the road and the crouching and the blanket she woke up to find on her shoulders. She told her about the study and the patience and the 2 hours of working in the same room at the same table, on the same problem, without anyone having to explain or perform. She told her about the conversation that morning in the doorway, and the things she had said about wanting to have a conversation when this was over. That wasn't about any of this. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He's not safe, is he? In the conventional sense." "No," Amelia said. "He's not. And you're not running from that." "I'm not running from anything anymore," Amelia said. "I'm choosing what to walk toward. That's different." Clara looked at her for a moment. "The angry, cleaner version of you," she said slowly, "is not going to ask me whether this is a good idea." "No," Amelia said. "And if I told you I was worried, I'd tell you that's fair, and that I'm keeping my eyes open, and that if anything changes, I'll tell you. And then I'd ask you to trust me." Clara considered this. "I trust you," she said finally. "I'm not sure I trust him, but I trust you, which is a start." It was the right answer. It was the answer of someone who had been paying attention to all the wrong things in her marriage for years, things that were external to her instead of grounded in her own capacity to see and judge and decide, someone who had learned finally that the most reliable instrument in the room was herself. She went to bed that night in Clara's small guest room, on a mattress that was softer than it looked under a quilt that Clara had owned for 20 years, and she slept without dreaming. The call from Renata came at 7:15 the next morning. The court rejected Victor's motion to suppress the disclosure. Renata said without preamble. Hargrove filed at midnight. The judge ruled by 6 a.m. The disclosure stands. Amelia sat up in bed. "That's fast," she said. The judge had already reviewed the preliminary filing. She was not impressed by the suppression argument. Renata's voice carried the particular satisfaction of someone who rarely allowed themselves visible satisfaction. "Hargrove is filing a secondary motion challenging the methodology of the forensic analysis, but that's standard procedure, and it will not succeed. The analysis is defensible at any level of scrutiny." "What's Victor doing?" Amelia said. "His attorney made a statement to the press at 6:30 this morning," Renata said. "They are characterizing this as a coordinated attack on a grieving husband by a troubled wife acting in conspiracy with known criminal elements." There it was. "Criminal elements," Amelia repeated. "Lucian's name was not mentioned explicitly," Renata said. "But the implication was clear enough for anyone paying attention." Amelia stood up. She walked to the window of Clara's guest room and stood looking out at the ordinary street below. People walking dogs. A delivery truck idling at the corner. The completely mundane texture of a city going about its morning completely indifferent to the fact that her life was currently moving at a velocity she could barely track. "What does Lucian say?" she said. "He says the statement is expected and that it changes nothing about the legal strategy," Renata said. "He also says—" A brief pause, which from Renata was unusual enough to be significant. "He says to tell you that he has handled this before, and that the important thing is not the noise, but the record, and that the record is clean." She held the phone for a moment. "Tell him I heard that," she said. "I will," Renata said. "There's one more thing." "What?" "Victor has requested a formal mediation session," Renata said. "He filed the request through Hargrove at 7 a.m. It's being framed as an attempt to resolve the matter privately before litigation becomes protracted." His attorney's language was... Another pause. He referred to it as an opportunity for reconciliation. Amelia almost laughed. Reconciliation. Victor Carter, who had built a 3-year infrastructure for her destruction, who had driven her to an empty road and told her she was a liability, who had fabricated mental health records and hired the most aggressive litigation firm in the state, and tried to suppress a legal disclosure that cleared her name. Victor Carter wanted reconciliation. She knew exactly what that meant. He was scared. The motion had been rejected. The forensic analysis was holding. The disclosure was in the record. He was looking at the shape of what was coming, and he wanted a private room where he could try to control the narrative one more time, where he could deploy that particular polished, convincing version of himself that had worked on her for 7 years, and where whatever she said in response would be off the record. "Tell them yes," Amelia said. Renata paused. "You want to agree to the mediation?" "I want to be in the room," Amelia said. "I want to look at him, and I want him to look at me, and I want to say what I have to say in front of a neutral party who is recording everything. If he wants a private meeting, he can have one, but private doesn't mean unwitnessed, and it doesn't mean off the record." She paused. "Can we set those terms?" "I can negotiate the terms," Renata said slowly. "A mediation session with a certified mediator and official documentation is standard. It's not what he's expecting, but if he agrees, it protects you." "He'll agree," Amelia said, "because refusing makes him look like he's avoiding accountability. Hargrove will tell him that." "You've thought about this carefully," Renata said. "I've thought about him carefully," Amelia said. "For a long time. I know how he moves." Yeah. Victor agreed to the mediation terms within 3 hours. Hargrove sent the confirmation with what Amelia read as barely disguised frustration in the language, the kind of professional writing that conveys irritation without saying so directly. They had wanted a quiet room with controlled access. They were getting a formal session with documentation. Victor had overruled them, which meant he was more scared than his attorneys thought was wise. She spent the afternoon preparing, not rehearsing speeches. She had learned enough in the past 3 weeks about her own voice to know that her most powerful sentences came from clarity rather than preparation. What she prepared was the opposite of a script. She went back through everything she knew about Victor Carter, not the official version, not the folder version, but the human version. The person she had lived with. The patterns and the tells, and the particular architecture of his manipulation. She thought about how he apologized when he was cornered, the specific shape of those apologies, the way they always began with him and his feelings before they ever reached her and hers. The way he framed his worst behavior as a symptom of how much he cared, of how much pressure he was under, of how difficult things had been for him, so that by the end of his apologies, she was somehow in the position of comforting him for the harm he had done to her. She was not going to be in that position again. Clara knocked on the guest room door that evening and came in and sat on the edge of the bed and watched Amelia organizing her notes for a while. "When is it?" Clara said. "Day after tomorrow," Amelia said. 10 a.m. "Do you want me there?" Amelia looked at her. "I need you somewhere I can call from afterward," she said. "Not in the room. In the room I need to be only myself." Clara nodded. "Okay, I'll be here." Amelia's phone buzzed. Lucian. She looked at Clara briefly. Clara stood up, squeezed her shoulder once and left the room, pulling the door almost closed behind her, which was her way of giving privacy without completely disappearing. Amelia answered. "Renata told me about the mediation," Lucian said. "Good," she said. "It's a smart move," he said. "It's also a significant one. Are you ready for what he's going to do in that room?" "I know what he's going to do," she said. "He's going to try to be the Victor he was when I married him. He's going to try to remind me of everything I loved. He's going to be warm and sincere and just broken enough that it looks like genuine remorse. And then, when that doesn't work, he's going to shift into something harder, and he's going to try to find the crack." A brief silence. "You know him well," Lucian said. "I spent 7 years studying him without knowing that's what I was doing," she said. "Turns out that's useful." "What do you need from me?" he said. She almost smiled at that. The question she had heard from him so many times in the past 3 weeks. The question that was the opposite of Victor's approach, which was never to ask what she needed, but to decide what she needed, and then provide it, and then explain to her why she should be grateful. "I need to do this myself," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking to be there. I'm asking what you need." "For you to trust that I can handle it," she said. A pause. "I trust it completely," he said. "I trusted it before you did." The truth of that landed. He had. From the very first conversation in his study when she came in with the financial records, she had already started tracking herself. He had not needed to be convinced that she was capable. He had simply pointed her at the Cyprus connection and let her run. "Lucian," she said. "Yes?" "When this is over," she said, "I meant what I said." "I know," he said. "So did I." She held the phone after the call ended and sat with the particular feeling of something you are holding carefully because you are not ready to name it yet, but you know it is real. Then she put the phone down and went back to her notes. The morning of the mediation, she woke before her alarm. She lay in the dark of Clara's guest room and went through everything deliberately. Not rehearsing, just confirming. The forensic analysis, the documented timeline, the filed disclosure, the forged signatures that a handwriting expert had already broken down to specific technical inconsistencies. All of it already on record, already beyond suppression, already in a place where Victor Carter could not touch it. She was not walking into that room to fight. She was walking in to bear witness to something that had already been decided. She dressed carefully, not to impress, not to perform. She chose clothes that were hers, not the things she had worn in Victor's life, which had been chosen with his preferences as the primary filter, but clothes she had bought in the past week with her own eyes and her own money, the first fully autonomous shopping she had done in longer than she could clearly remember. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for a long moment. She did not see the woman who had knelt on wet pavement 3.5 weeks ago. She saw someone who had come through something and kept their shape. Clara was in the kitchen when she came out. Coffee was ready. There was toast on the table. Clara looked at her once and nodded the compressed total communication of sisters who know each other down to the bone. "Call me after," Clara said. "I will," Amelia said. The mediation center was a neutral office space in the center of the city. Clean and deliberate in its anonymity, the kind of space designed to belong to no one, so that no one has the advantage of familiarity. The mediator was a woman named Patricia Chen, who had been doing this for 23 years, and who had the particular professional warmth of someone who has sat across from a great deal of human damage and learned how to be present with it without being consumed by it. She shook Amelia's hand and said, "I've reviewed the documentation from both parties. We'll proceed chronologically, and every party will have uninterrupted time to speak. Is that acceptable?" "Yes," Amelia said. She sat down. The door opened. Victor came in. She had been preparing herself for this moment. She had known intellectually that seeing him would be different from thinking about him, that the physical reality of him in a room would hit differently than the documentary reality of his name on forensic reports. She had thought she was ready. She was almost right. He looked thinner. There were shadows under his eyes that she recognized as the evidence of several weeks of not sleeping well, which she recognized because she had spent years watching for those shadows as indicators of his mood. He was dressed carefully, not overdressed, not the aggressive power suit choice of a man trying to dominate a room, but something calibrated to look like a man who is under duress and still trying to be reasonable. He had thought about this too. He looked at her. Something moved across his face that she could not entirely read. It was not the expression she had seen in the car the night he drove her to the road. That had been the face of a man completing a transaction. This was different. This was a man who had expected something to go away and had discovered that it was still there, and that what was still there was different from what he had discarded. He sat down across from her. "Amelia," he said. "Mr. Carter," she said. Something shifted in his face at that. A small thing. But she had always been good at reading his small things. Patricia Chen established the parameters and then opened the session. Victor's attorney made the opening statement. It was polished and measured and constructed around the theme of a marriage under strain. A wife who had been struggling, a husband who had made business decisions that were complicated and that he regretted had caused confusion. The word confusion appeared 5 times. The word troubled appeared 3 times. His attorney never said unstable, but built every sentence so that it landed in the space where that word would have gone. Then it was her turn. She did not look at Victor's attorney. She looked at Victor. 7 years ago, she said, I married a man I believed was the most honest person I had ever met. I believed that because he told me things directly and clearly, and with a confidence that I confused with integrity. I understand now that there is a significant difference between a person who is confident in the truth and a person who is confident in their version of it. Victor's jaw tightened slightly. I am not here today to ask for an apology, she said. I have not believed an apology from you in longer than I can clearly establish, and I think that timeline tells us something important about the foundation of what we called a marriage. She paused. I am here because there is a legal record that contains my name, and I intend to make absolutely clear in a documented session with a witness what I knew and did not know about the financial arrangements that carry my name. Mrs. Carter, Victor's attorney started. I have uninterrupted time, she said, not looking away from Victor. That was the agreement. Patricia Chen said, correct. Please continue, Mrs. Carter. She continued. She laid it out without emotion and without performance the way she had written the statement 3 weeks earlier. The accounts, the signatures, the night she found the folder, the word liability, the road. And then she said something she had not planned to say. It came from the place where preparation runs out and truth takes over. She said, Victor, you made a calculation. A long time ago, probably longer than I realize, you looked at me and calculated that I was manageable, that I was loyal enough to be useful and afraid enough to be quiet. You were partially right. I was both of those things. What you missed in your calculation was that loyal and afraid are not permanent states. They are conditions produced by an environment. You changed the environment, and here we are. The room was very quiet. Victor's attorney was looking at his client. Victor was looking at Amelia. For the first time in what felt like years, he looked at her the way you look at something you have miscalculated fundamentally. Not with guilt. She did not expect guilt from him, and she was right not to. But with something that was almost more significant than guilt, with the expression of a man who has just understood that the model he built of another person was wrong in a way that cannot be corrected. He had built a model of a woman who would absorb what was done to her and diminish. He was sitting across from the evidence that he was wrong. What do you want? He said. His attorney put a hand on his arm. Victor ignored it. What do you want? He said again, and this time the calibrated warmth was gone. And what was underneath it was not malice exactly, but the flat direct calculation of a man who wants to know the cost. She had expected this question. She had thought about this question. I want my name removed from every account, every document, every financial record it appears on, without my verified consent, she said. I want a formal declaration documented and legally binding that my signatures on the existing documents are forged, and that I had no knowledge of or participation in the financial arrangements they represent. I want the disclosure my attorney filed to stand without further legal challenge. She paused. And I want it known, not just in legal documents. I want every person who was told that I was troubled and confused and unstable to have access to the truth. Victor was quiet. That last part, his attorney said carefully, is not something we can formally agree to in this context. I'm not asking you to agree to it, Amelia said. I'm telling you that it is going to happen regardless. I am telling you that because I want Victor to understand clearly that there is no version of this that ends with my reputation and his remaining in the same condition. One of us walked out of that marriage with integrity intact. She looked at Victor. It wasn't you. The silence after that was the most complete silence she had ever produced in a room that contained Victor Carter. He looked at her for a long, still moment. Then he said something she had not expected. He said, "You're right." His attorney's head turned sharply. "Victor," he said. "She's right," Victor said. His voice had gone flat and quiet in a way that was different from all his other quietnesses. Not controlled dangerous, not warm calculated, just flat. The voice of a man who has stopped performing because there is no longer an audience he can win. The signatures are forged. She had no knowledge of the accounts. Everything in the disclosure is accurate. The room was very still. "Victor," his attorney said, low and urgent. "Do not say another?" "It doesn't matter," Victor said. He was still looking at Amelia. "Hargrove already told me this was unwinnable once the judge refused the suppression. I just needed to—" He stopped. "I needed to see if there was another way through." His eyes moved across her face. "There isn't one." She held his gaze. She thought about everything she had felt for this man. 7 years of love and accommodation, and the constant low-grade labor of loving someone who made loving him a job. She waited to feel something dramatic at this moment, vindication perhaps, or the particular rush of being seen after years of being looked through. What she felt instead was very quiet and very solid. She felt finished. Not empty, finished. The way something feels when it has reached its actual ending, rather than just stopping. "Thank you," she said to Patricia Chen. "I have everything I needed from this session." She stood up. Victor said, "Amelia." She looked at him. She thought about what he was going to say next. She thought about the version of his apology that was already assembled somewhere behind his eyes. The one that started with him. The one that explained what he had been going through. The one that eventually circuitously found its way to an acknowledgement that bent in her direction, just enough to ask something of her in return. She shook her head. "Not today," she said. "Not ever, actually. But specifically not today." She picked up her bag. She walked to the door. She did not look back. "Enya." She called Clara from the sidewalk outside. "It's done," she said. "How do you feel?" Clara said. She stood on the sidewalk in the middle of an ordinary city morning and thought about that question. "Like myself," she said. "Like the version of myself I was trying to find." She could hear Clara breathing in the particular relieved way that people who love you breathe when something they were afraid of resolves. "Come home," Clara said. "I made soup." She laughed. It was the first full laugh she had produced in a long time, and it came from somewhere real, not performed, not social, from the actual seat of something genuine. "I'm on my way," she said. She walked 2 blocks. Her phone buzzed. Lucian. She stopped on the sidewalk and answered. "It's done," she said before he could speak. A pause. "I know," he said. Renata was notified. Victor's attorney filed a consent to the disclosure conditions 20 minutes ago. He admitted it, she said. In the room, with the mediator present. He admitted the signatures were forged. Another pause. Longer. "Good," Lucian said. And the word was so quiet and so complete that it took up more space than it should have. "I didn't do what you thought I might do," she said. "What did I think you might do?" "You thought there was a chance I might soften," she said. "When I saw him, that the history between us might make me pull back from the edges." He was quiet for a moment. "I thought it was possible," he admitted. "Not likely, but possible." "I didn't," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not surprised." She stood on the sidewalk. She thought about the conversation she had told him she wanted to have when this was over. The conversation that wasn't about any of this. She felt the shape of it waiting somewhere in the near distance, patient the way she had learned that real things are patient because they do not need to force their way into existence. "Lucian," she said. "Yes." "It's over," she said. She felt him understand what she meant. Not just the mediation, not just the legal case, the part that had been between them, the necessary distance they had maintained for her protection and for the integrity of the case and for all the right reasons that were no longer the reasons. "Yes," he said. "It is." "I'm going to Clara's," she said. "I'm going to eat soup and sleep for approximately 11 hours, and then I would like to have that conversation." "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," she said. She put the phone in her pocket and walked the rest of the way to Clara's apartment. The soup was hot, and it was exactly what she needed. She ate 2 full bowls and let Clara talk about ordinary things about work and about a movie she had watched, and about a neighbor who had recently acquired a very loud dog, and she listened and laughed in the right places and felt the almost forgotten texture of a normal evening after an enormous day. She fell asleep on Clara's couch, halfway through a sentence she was saying about the soup. Clara put a blanket over her. She slept. Outside, the city ran its ordinary course. Somewhere in it, Victor Carter was sitting with his attorney, absorbing the cost of a calculation that had gone wrong in every direction. Somewhere in it, Renata was updating the legal file with the session documentation. Somewhere in it, 4 people whose names had been borrowed without their consent were going to receive phone calls in the coming days that would change the shape of their uncertainty into something they could act on. And somewhere in it, a man who had built his life around control was sitting in a study with a phone in his hand, thinking about a conversation he had agreed to have tomorrow that was not about any of this. He was not afraid of it. For the first time in a very long time, neither was she. She woke up on Clara's couch at 5:47 in the morning, not because of a noise, not because of a bad dream. She woke up the way she had been waking up for the past several weeks, cleanly, completely, with the immediate awareness of where she was and what the day was going to require of her. Her body had stopped the slow, dread-soaked re-entry into consciousness that had been her morning pattern for most of her marriage, the way she used to surface from sleep, already bracing for Victor's mood, already calibrating, already preparing the version of herself that would move through his day without creating friction. That pattern was gone. She lay on the couch for a few minutes and listened to Clara's apartment breathe around her, the refrigerator running, a pigeon on the windowsill. Somewhere 2 floors up, someone's alarm going off and being silenced. She thought about today. Lucian had said tomorrow, and tomorrow was now today, and the conversation she had told him she wanted, the one that was not about any of this, was waiting somewhere in the hours ahead with the particular patience of something that had been given permission to exist. She was not nervous exactly. She was aware. Fully, completely aware, in the way that you are when something matters. She got up, folded the blanket Clara had put over her, and went to make coffee. She stood in the small kitchen while it brewed and thought about the difference between where she was now and where she had been 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago, she had been standing in a different kitchen, holding tea she had made for a headache, watching rain through a window, listening for the force of a door to tell her what mood she was walking into. 4 weeks was not a long time, except that sometimes it was everything. Clara appeared at 7, already dressed, already holding her phone, with the focused expression she got when something had come through overnight. Renata sent a summary, Clara said. The legal team filed the final consent documentation at midnight. Victor's attorney signed everything. She looked up from the phone. It's officially on record. All of it. Amelia poured her sister a cup of coffee. And, she said, and there's something else. Clara set the phone on the counter so Amelia could see the screen. The story broke at 6 a.m. Financial News, then General Press, picked it up by 6:30. Victor Carter, the shell company's The Network. Prescott was named. 3 other network members were named. She paused. Your name is in the reporting too, but only in the context of the forensic analysis, identified as the primary victim of identity fraud. Amelia read the headline. She read the first 3 paragraphs. She set the phone back down on the counter and picked up her coffee. How do you feel? Clara said. The same way I felt yesterday, Amelia said. Finished. But now it's finished in public. Clara watched her. You're not relieved, Clara said slowly. I thought you'd be relieved. I am, Amelia said. It's just quieter than I expected. Relief. She thought about how to explain it. I think I expected relief to feel like something being added back, like something returning. But it actually feels like something being subtracted, like a weight I stopped noticing I was carrying just isn't there anymore. Clara nodded slowly. That's what it feels like when you put something down, she said. You expect to feel lighter. Instead, you just feel like yourself again. Amelia looked at her sister. When did you get wise? She said. I've always been wise, Clara said. You were just too busy managing Victor to notice. Amelia's phone buzzed on the counter. Lucian. She looked at Clara. Clara picked up her coffee and walked with tremendous dignity back toward her bedroom, pulling the door behind her in a way that suggested she was giving privacy while simultaneously making it very clear she expected a full debrief later. Amelia answered. "You saw the press coverage," Lucian said. "This morning," she said. "Clara showed me." "How are you?" She thought about how to answer that. She thought about the number of people who had asked her that question in the past 4 weeks, and how differently she had answered it each time, depending on how much of the truth she was ready to hold in language on any given day. "Steady," she said. "Genuinely steady, not performing steady." "I know the difference," he said. "I know you do," she said. "That's one of the things about you that I—" She stopped. She had been about to say something that belonged in the conversation that was not about any of this. "That's a conversation for later." A brief pause. "Yes," he said. "It is. Can I come to you, or would you prefer to meet somewhere else?" She thought about that. She thought about neutral ground versus his space versus hers. She thought about what it meant that she actually had a preference, that she was sitting with a question about where she wanted to be, and discovering that the answer came from her own center, rather than from an assessment of what someone else needed. "There's a coffee place on Meridian," she said. 2 blocks from Clara's. I'll meet you there at 10. 10, he said. She hung up and stood for a moment in the quiet kitchen. Then she went to get ready. She was not dressing for anyone but herself, which was a sentence that had been true in her head for the past 2 weeks, but was only now starting to be true in the place where sentences have to land before they become real. She chose a gray sweater that was soft, and that she had bought because she liked the way it felt against her hands when she touched the sleeve in the store. She chose jeans. She chose boots that were practical. She put on the only piece of jewelry she was wearing these days, a small gold ring on her right hand that had been her grandmother's, that she had stopped wearing during the marriage, because Victor said it looked old-fashioned, that she had put back on the day she moved into Clara's. She looked at herself. She was ready. Lucian was already there when she arrived. She had not expected that. She had expected to be first. She was almost always early now. Another habit of the recovery period, the way her body had started moving toward things, rather than away from them. But he was already at a corner table with 2 coffees on it, and the expression of a man who had arrived before the agreed time because he did not want her to walk in alone. She sat down. They looked at each other. It was the first time they had been in the same room since the morning she left the mansion, and the strangeness of seeing him in an ordinary coffee place, not in his study, not in the documented rooms of the work they had been doing together, but in a regular space, with regular light, and the sound of a milk steamer, and other people having other conversations all around them, was significant in a way she had not entirely anticipated. He looked the same. Of course he looked the same. It had been 4 days. But the context made him look different. The way a person looks different when you see them outside the setting where you first knew them, and what she noticed that she had not fully noticed before was that he looked real. Present. Exactly where he was, with no performance in any direction. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. "This is the conversation," she said. "Yes," he said. "I don't know how to start it," she admitted. "I said I wanted it and I meant it, and I've been thinking about it for 4 days, and I still don't know how to start it." "Start anywhere," he said. "We have time." She looked at him. She said, "Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with the work." He considered that for a moment. "I haven't taken a day off in 11 years, he said. "Not because I can't, because I've never been sure what I would do with one." She had not expected that answer. 11 years, she said. 12 actually, he said. I said 11 because it sounds less. She almost smiled. "What would you do with one," she said, "if you took a day off?" He thought about it with the same seriousness he brought to everything. "Walk somewhere," he said. "Somewhere with actual distance, not a city. Somewhere you can walk for an hour without hitting a building. A pause. I grew up in a city. I have lived in cities my entire life. I have sometimes thought about what it would feel like to be in a place where there are no buildings and no people making decisions that affect other people and no phones. That sounds like you'd hate it after 40 minutes, she said. Something happened in his face that was more than the almost smile. It was an actual smile, brief and real. Probably, he said. But the first 40 minutes sound good. She laughed. It was easy. That was the thing that struck her, sitting in the ordinary light of a coffee shop with this man who was not ordinary by any definition anyone had ever used. It was easy in the way that things are easy when they are not requiring anything of you that you cannot actually give. She had not felt that with Victor in years. She was not sure she had ever felt it with Victor in quite this specific way. The ease with Victor had always been conditional. It had always existed within the territory of what he was willing to permit to be easy, which was never all of it, which was why she had spent 7 years carefully navigating the edges of his willingness. This was different. This was two people sitting at a table, with nothing to navigate except each other, and neither of them was an obstacle. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "The night you found me," she said. "Before you knew who I was or what had happened, when you crouched down on the road and asked my name, what were you actually thinking?" He was quiet for a moment. "I was thinking that someone had left a person on the ground," he said, "and that I was not the kind of man who kept driving when that was in front of him." He paused. "And I was thinking that you were holding yourself together with everything you had, even on your knees on wet pavement, and that whatever had happened to you, you were not broken by it yet. And I thought—" He stopped. "What?" she said. "I thought that whoever had put you there had made a significant error in judgment," he said, "about what you were." She held that. "You could tell that from 30 seconds on a road in the rain," she said. "I've spent my adult life reading people quickly," he said. "It's a survival skill in my world. You read someone in the first 30 seconds or the next 30 could go wrong." He looked at her directly. "What I read in 30 seconds was someone who had been hurt by something unexpected, but who had not at the core been diminished by it. Someone who was still fully present inside what was happening to her. That's not nothing. Most people go somewhere else when things get bad enough. You didn't." She thought about what it meant to be seen clearly in the worst moment of your life and not found wanting. "I didn't feel present," she said. "I felt like I was dissolving." "I know," he said. "That's not the same thing." She set down her coffee. She looked at him. She said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it as information and not as a thing that requires a response. Can you do that? Try me," he said. "I'm not the same person I was 4 weeks ago," she said. "Obviously, but I mean something more specific. I spent 7 years learning to want what someone else wanted. Learning to read someone else's needs as more real than my own. And I am actively in the process of unlearning that, which means that some of what I feel right now, I'm not entirely sure I can trust yet. Not because I think it's wrong, but because I've been wrong before about what I was feeling versus what I was performing for someone else's benefit." She held his gaze. "I'm telling you this because I don't want to perform. I don't want to go into anything performing. And so I need you to know that what I feel is real, and also that I'm still learning to trust the difference." He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that receives something rather than deflecting it. "Okay," he said. "That's it," she said. "Okay." "What did you want me to say?" "I don't know. Something that either scared me or relieved me. Something I had to respond to." "I'm not going to do that," he said. "What you just told me doesn't require a response. It requires me to understand it and adjust accordingly. So that's what I'm going to do." She stared at him. "You're infuriating," she said, "in a very specific and unusual way." "I've been told," he said. "Who told you?" "Daria, regularly." She laughed again. The morning moved around them. People came and went. The coffee got cold, and they ordered more, and the conversation moved through things that were not about shell companies or legal disclosures, or the careful strategy of dismantling a man's empire. It moved through the ordinary things that people discuss when they are finding out who someone is in the absence of crisis. His 11-year-old interest in architecture, that he had never done anything with because there was always something more urgent. The summer she was 19 when she had worked on a farm in Vermont for 2 months and come back changed in a way she had never been able to explain. The fact that he read fiction almost exclusively because he spent all day in the reality of human beings in fiction was the only place they behaved in ways that were genuinely surprising. The fact that she had not read a novel in 4 years because Victor did not read and had made her feel through sustained low-grade pressure that it was a slightly self-indulgent habit. That last thing landed quietly between them. "You stopped reading," he said. "I stopped a lot of things," she said. "I'm finding them again." "What else?" She thought about it. "Cooking," she said. "I used to cook because I loved it. Somewhere in the marriage it became a service I was providing. 2 different things." She paused. "Singing in the car. I caught myself doing that last week for the first time in years, and then I got embarrassed and stopped, and then I thought about why I was embarrassed and started again." He looked at her with an expression that she had not seen from him before. Soft was not the right word for it. Lucian was not a soft man. But there was something in his face that was wholly unguarded in a way his face rarely was, something that he was either choosing not to protect or was not managing to. And whatever it was, it made her feel seen in a way that was not about the case or the documents or her resilience or her capability. It was just her, the person she was in the car singing badly and getting embarrassed. That person was seen. "I want to say something," he said. "Say it." "I have been careful," he said, "about the line between what this started as and what it has become. I've been careful because you needed it to be handled carefully, and because the last thing I wanted to be was someone who took advantage of a situation where you had nowhere else to go. And I'm still careful. I'm going to stay careful." He paused. "But I want you to know that what it has become is not something I planned or engineered. It happened because of who you are. And I want that said out loud in a normal place in the middle of an ordinary morning where there's no crisis and no strategy and nothing it could be confused with." She held very still. She thought about what it meant to be chosen rather than needed. She thought about the difference between a man who kept her close because she was useful and a man who was sitting across from her in a coffee shop saying, "This is not strategy. This is not need. This is you." "I hear you," she said. "Good," he said. "I'm not ready to call it anything yet," she said. "Whatever this is." "I'm not asking you to," he said. "But I want to find out what it is," she said. Slowly, with my eyes open. "That works for me," he said. She nodded. She picked up her coffee. They stayed at the table for another hour, and nothing that was said in that hour was as significant as what had already been said. But it was all necessary, in the way that ordinary time is necessary after significant things. You need the level ground after the climb to know how far you have come. 3 weeks later, Amelia went back to the road. It was not something she planned. She was in a car returning from a meeting with her attorney about the final stages of the divorce filing, and the route her driver took passed through the outskirts of the city, and she recognized a turn and she asked him to stop. She got out. It was afternoon, not night. No rain. The road was empty in the ordinary way of roads in industrial areas at 3 in the afternoon, not the specific charged emptiness of a stormy night when someone has just driven away. She stood on the sidewalk. She looked at the stretch of road where she had gone to her knees 4 weeks and 3 days ago. She waited to feel something complicated. What she felt instead was very simple. She had been here before, and she had gotten up. She had gotten up and gotten into a car, and found her way to a woman who could help her fall and land and rise again, and a man who told her the decision about what happened next was hers, and a sister who said, "Come home," and made soup, and a friend of 15 years who said, I trust you without hesitation. And 4 strangers whose names had been stolen the same way hers had been, and she had built something out of the rubble of what Victor Carter thought he had left behind. She had built a case and a record and a legal document that cleared her name. She had built the beginning of a company, her own small for now, in the consulting space she knew from her years watching Victor's world from the inside, but hers, completely hers, without a single forged signature or borrowed identity or person whose trust had been used as a tool. She had built a conversation in a coffee shop that was still ongoing slowly, with eyes open. She had built herself back. She stood on the road, and she did not cry. She had expected to cry. She had thought this was the kind of moment that required tears, the closing the loop kind of emotional reckoning that arrives when you return to the place where something ended and you are trying to make peace with it. But she did not feel like she needed to make peace with it. She felt like she had already won. Not over Victor. She was past measuring herself against Victor. His name was in court records and financial disclosures and press reports that she had not written and would continue to circulate without any effort on her part. His empire had not collapsed dramatically. It was deflating slowly, the way overextended things deflate when the pressure is finally removed and there's nothing holding the shape anymore. Prescott had flipped. 2 other network members had cooperated with investigators. The process was grinding forward the way legal processes do, unhurried and implacable. She was not thinking about him. She was thinking about herself. She was thinking about the woman who had knelt here and not known what came next and had found out. She was thinking about the fact that the most important thing that had happened on this road was not that Lucian had found her. The most important thing was that she had stayed conscious. That she had kept something in herself intact through the worst night of her life, some core of herself that had not dissolved when everything else did, some stubborn fundamental insistence on being present, even in the worst of it. That part had always been there. Victor had not broken it. He had not broken it because it was not the kind of thing that could be broken from the outside. It could only be surrendered from within, and she had never surrendered it, not even during the years when she had been closest to not knowing it was there. She breathed in. She breathed out. She got back in the car. She called Lucian from the car. "I went back to the road," she said. A pause. "How was it?" he said. "Smaller than I remembered," she said. "Just a road." "That's usually how it goes," he said. "Places where big things happened are almost always smaller than they feel in memory." "How do you know that?" "I've been to a few," he said. She looked out the window at the city moving past her. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Tell me." "You didn't save me," she said. "I want to say that clearly. Not because I'm not grateful for what you did. I am more than I know how to articulate. But what happened between the road and now, the parts that actually matter, those were mine. The anger and the documents and the statement and the mediation, those were mine." "Yes," he said. "They were. You gave me a warm room," she said, "and time, and the radical experience of someone asking what I wanted before deciding anything. That's what you gave me. The rest I did." "I know," he said. "I knew it then. That's why I let you." She thought about the word let and whether she would have accepted it from him a month ago. She decided she could accept it now because she understood what he meant. Not permission. Recognition. He had recognized what she was capable of, and had organized everything around letting it emerge rather than directing it. There was a version of protection that looks like control, and a version that looks like space, and he had given her the second kind, when the first kind would have been much easier for him. "I'm starting my company next month," she said. "Officially, I have 3 clients already." "I know," he said. "Renata told me. She also told me one of them came through a referral from her." Amelia paused. "She didn't tell me that," she said. "She wouldn't," he said. "She'd consider it irrelevant. She referred them because they needed your specific expertise, not as a favor." "I'm going to have a conversation with her about what I consider relevant," Amelia said. "Good luck," Lucian said. She has strong opinions about relevance. So do I, Amelia said. She heard something in his voice when he responded, something warm and specific, the particular quality of a man who is smiling without intending to demonstrate it. I know, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the conversation in the coffee shop. Yes. I'm ready to have the next one, she said. A pause that was not long but felt considered. When? He said. Tonight, she said. If you're available. I'll be available, he said. Lucian, she said. Yes. The first 40 minutes, she said. Of the day off you haven't taken, the ones that sound good before you'd hate it. She paused. I want to be there for those. The silence on the other end of the line was the most complete silence she had gotten from him, and she had gotten a lot of silences from Lucian. Moretti had learned to read their textures and understand what moved in them. This one was full in a way she had not heard before, full of something that did not have a simple name and did not need one. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay. She put the phone in her pocket and leaned back in the seat and watched the city go past the window. She thought about Margaret, who had come to dinner at Clara's the previous week and sat across from her for 3 hours, catching up on 15 years of friendship that had been slowly closed off from both sides without either of them knowing why, and who had said at the end of the evening that she seemed like someone who had finally arrived somewhere she'd been trying to get to for a long time. She thought about the 4 people whose names had been in Lucian's folder. All 4 of them had been contacted. 3 had responded immediately. 1 had needed time. All 4 were in the process of having their names removed from the accounts quietly, through legal processes that Renata had helped establish, and none of them would ever know how close they had been to becoming someone else's liability. She thought about Daria, who had sent her a text the day the press coverage broke that said only, "good," and who had followed it 20 minutes later with a second text that said, "the self-defense training. Don't let it lapse." Amelia had replied, "I won't." And she meant it. She thought about Clara, who was sitting at home right now, probably reorganizing her kitchen for something to do with her hands while she waited to hear how the attorney meeting had gone, because Clara processed anxiety through spatial reorganization and had done so since they were children. She thought about the company she was starting. She had a name for it. She had thought of it at 3 in the morning 2 weeks ago, lying awake in Clara's guest room, with the particular productive insomnia of someone whose mind was finally running clean and fast in directions she actually wanted to go. The name was Carter Consulting, which some people would find ironic, given the circumstances of how she had arrived at needing her own company, but which she found clarifying. Carter was her name. It had always been her name, even when she gave it to a marriage, and a man used it for things she did not choose. Taking it back as the name of something she had built herself felt exactly right. The car stopped. She was back at Clara's building. She got out. She went upstairs. Clara was in the kitchen, as predicted, reorganizing the cabinet above the stove with the focused energy of someone who needed something to do with their concern. "How'd it go?" Clara said without turning around. "The final divorce filing goes in next week," Amelia said. 60 days after that, it's done." Clara turned around. She looked at Amelia with the thoroughness of a woman taking inventory of someone she loves. "Okay," Clara said. "Okay," Amelia said. "You're going to see him tonight," Clara said. Not a question. "How do you always know?" Amelia said. "Because you have the face of someone who has decided something," Clara said. "You've had it for an hour. And the last time you had it, you called him." She turned back to the cabinet. "Go, I'm fine. I have soup." Amelia laughed. She sat down at the kitchen table for a few minutes, while Clara reorganized in silence, the comfortable silence of 2 people who know each other well enough that being in the same room is its own form of conversation. Then she said, "Clara." "Thank you," Amelia said, "for the couch. And the soup, and for not asking me to explain myself before I was ready, and for saying I trust you about him before you had any reason to." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You've been thanking me for things your whole life that didn't require thanks. Things that were just what you do for people you love. She set a bowl down on the shelf with the deliberateness of someone making a point through an action. Let me just love you, Amelia. You don't have to earn it. Amelia pressed her hand to her mouth briefly. She sat with that for a moment. Then she nodded. She stood up. She went to get ready to see Lucian. He came to her. She had half expected them to meet somewhere again, another coffee shop, another neutral space. But he came to Clara's building, and he rang the buzzer. And when she came downstairs, he was standing on the sidewalk in the ordinary evening light, and he looked like a man who had decided to be exactly where he was. She walked out to him. They stood for a moment on the sidewalk. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. They walked. No destination, no plan. Just the city in the evening, which is one of the few things that is always available to people who are not sure yet what they are doing, but are certain they want to be doing it together. They walked for a long time before either of them said anything that mattered. It was Amelia who said it. "I want to tell you the thing I was going to say this morning in the coffee shop," she said. "Before I stopped myself, because it belonged here." "Tell me," he said. "The things about you that are true," she said. "You asked me what I wanted, and you meant it every single time. You were patient without being passive. You gave me space without disappearing. You told me the truth when you could, and told me when you couldn't, and never used the difference as a weapon." She paused. "And when I corrected you, you said, 'Thank you.' Do you know how many times in my life someone has said thank you when I corrected them?" "How many?" he said. "Including you," she said. "Once." He was quiet. "I'm telling you this," she said, "because I spent a long time in a situation where the things that were true about me were not the things the other person was interested in, where who I actually was kept getting in the way of who I was supposed to be for him." She looked at Lucian. "I don't want that again. And I don't think that's what this is. But I need to say out loud what I'm building on so it's real." "What are you building on?" he said. "You," she said. "Who you actually are, not who I need you to be. Not a role in a story about my recovery. You. The man who hasn't taken a day off in 12 years because he doesn't know what he'd do with one, and who reads fiction because real people don't surprise him anymore." She paused. "The man who put a blanket over me and stood there a minute longer than he needed to." He stopped walking. She stopped too. He looked at her with the expression she had not been able to fully name in the coffee shop, the unguarded one, and she could name it now. Not softness, not tenderness exactly, more like recognition, the particular expression of a person who has been seen accurately and is learning how to receive that. "Amelia," he said. "Yes," she said. "I don't know how to do this carefully," he said. "I know how to be careful about things that affect other people's safety. I know how to be careful about operations and strategy and the pieces on a board. But this," he paused. "I don't have a system for this." "Neither do I," she said. "I had a system and it was wrong, so I'm starting without one." "That sounds right," he said. "It sounds terrifying," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "But the terrifying version is the real one." She looked at him. She thought about a road in the rain and a man crouching down and asking her name. She thought about warm rooms and honest documents and 2 hours of working in parallel without anyone needing to explain themselves. She thought about the conversation she had wanted and the patience of things that know they are real. She thought about every version of herself she had been on the way to becoming the person who was standing here. She thought about the woman who had knelt on the pavement and not known what came next. She had found out. She had found out that what comes next is harder and stranger and more luminous than anything you can plan for in the dark, and that the only requirement for getting there is staying present in the worst of it, which she had done, which it turned out she had always been capable of, which was what she had been trying to remember about herself for longer than she clearly knew. She was not Victor Carter's liability. She was not the woman the press coverage identified as the primary victim of his fraud. She was not Lucian Moretti's rescued woman, or his proof of principle, or the strongest person he'd ever met, though she held all of those things, though they had all been said and had mattered. She was Amelia Carter, 30 years old, starting a company next month, learning to read again, singing in cars, wearing her grandmother's ring, standing on a sidewalk in the evening, next to a man who had said, "I don't have a system for this," as if not having a system was the most honest thing he knew how to offer, which it was, which she understood because she was done with systems too. She reached out and took his hand. He looked down at their hands. Then he looked at her. "The first 40 minutes," she said, "of the day with no buildings." "When?" he said. "Soon," she said. He nodded. They kept walking. The city carried on around them, the way cities do, indifferent and alive, and full of the sound of other people building their lives in the dark, not knowing yet what they were building toward, trusting the process anyway, which is the only way any of it ever gets built. Amelia Carter had been left on a road in the rain by a man who thought she was finished. She had stood up. She had walked forward. She had found out who she was when everything that had been holding her in the wrong shape was finally gone. And what she found was not fragile, and was not borrowed, and was not contingent on anyone else's willingness to see it. It was hers. It had always been hers. And no one, not Victor Carter with his forged signatures and his shell companies and his liability protocols, not Hargrove and Associates with their suppression motions and their narrative strategies, not 7 years of being slowly, deliberately made smaller. No one had ever come close to taking it from her. Because you cannot take from a woman what she has not yet discovered she owns. And Amelia Carter had finally found what she owned. All of it. Every single piece.